Nero Wolfe, and the night train to Ravemoor. It was a Wednesday in late October when the telegram arrived, and I can pinpoint the exact moment because I'd just settled into the red leather chair with a glass of scotch and a copy of the racing form. The brownstone was quiet in that particular way it gets after 11 o'clock. Fritz had retired, Wolfe was upstairs with his orchids making final rounds before bed, and the 5 Dobermans were distributed according to their evening pattern. Caesar at the front door, Mars at the rear entrance, Apollo on the second-floor landing, Minerva in Wolfe's office where the bulletproof mirrors reflected the lamplight, and Diana prowling the basement where the reinforced windows overlooked the service entrance. The doorbell didn't ring. That was the first peculiarity. Instead, Caesar's low rumble drifted from the hallway, not his alert bark, but something deeper, more questioning. I set down my glass and moved to the hall. Through the one-way glass panel beside the door, I saw a figure retreating down the steps, already at the sidewalk. Caesar's brown eyes tracked the movement with professional interest. On the stoop lay a yellow envelope. I didn't touch it immediately. 3 weeks earlier, we'd received a package that turned out to contain not explosives, but a remarkably pungent wheel of cheese that had been aging in someone's vendetta for roughly 6 months. Wolfe had been apoplectic, not about the implied threat, but about the waste of good Roquefort potential. Fritz had needed 2 days to eliminate the smell. I crouched beside Caesar, who sniffed the envelope thoroughly before sitting back on his haunches. The all-clear signal. I picked it up. Standard Western Union, addressed to Nero Wolfe, with no return information. Inside, a single typed line. Courier dead stop Ravenmoor, no stop train leaves. Midnight stop. I was still staring at it when I heard Wolfe's elevator descending. He emerged a moment later, all 270-odd pounds of him, wearing his yellow pajamas and a scowl that suggested the Miltania had done something disappointing. Archie, it's past 11. Why are you standing in the hallway with that expression? This arrived without benefit of doorbell. I handed him the telegram. Caesar gave it a professional once-over. No cheese this time. Wolfe's eyes moved across the words once, twice. His lips pushed out, pulled in, the sign of cogitation. Ravenmoor. Mean anything to you? A coastal town in Maine. Approximately 200 miles northeast. Population of 700. Declining. A stop on the old Atlantic Heritage Railway line, which runs luxury sleeper service from New York on Wednesdays and Saturdays. He handed the telegram back. Beyond that, nothing. Check the morning papers tomorrow for courier deaths. If this is merely theatre, we'll know by breakfast. He turned toward the stairs. And if it's not theatre, then someone will make the error of clarifying their intentions. He paused with one foot on the first step. Instruct Caesar to maintain front door surveillance with Mars for the remainder of the night. Apollo to the roof access. Diana and Minerva to alternate patrols. If anyone approaches the brownstone before dawn, I want a warning, not a confrontation. You expecting company? I expect nothing, Archie, but preparation costs only sleep, and I was finished with that commodity anyway. He continued up the stairs. Good night. I stood there with the telegram, Caesar beside me, both of us looking at nothing in particular. The brownstone settled around us with its familiar creaks and sighs. Somewhere in the walls, the security system hummed. Motion sensors, reinforced steel shutters, ready to drop over every window, door locks that could withstand everything short of a tank. Wolfe had installed it all 7 years ago after the Baxter case, when someone had gotten enthusiastic with a rifle on 35th Street. I locked the front door's 3 separate bolts, set the alarm system, and went to redistribute the dogs. They took their new positions without fuss, Caesar and Mars flanking the front door like bronze statues, Apollo trotting upstairs to the roof access door, Diana padding toward the basement with her tail high, and Minerva settling in the hallway outside Wolfe's bedroom with her ears forward. The scotch was still waiting in the office. I picked up the glass, reconsidered, and poured it back into the bottle. Something about that telegram had activated an old instinct, the one that says when you might need to move fast, sobriety is your friend. I was right to trust it. At 1:15, Apollo barked twice from upstairs, the specific signal for roof access movement. I was out of the chair and taking the stairs 2 at a time, when I heard the sharp crack of something hitting the rear skylight, followed by Caesar's deep warning bark from below. The bulletproof glass held. Naturally, it always held, but through the skylight I could see a dark figure retreating across the neighboring building's roof, and down in the garden, Mars had his attention fixed on the rear wall, where another shadow was dropping back to the alley. I hit the alarm shutdown button, no point in waking the neighborhood, and went to check the skylight. A small crater in the glass, still warm to the touch. Bullet, probably 9mm, fired from an elevated position. It would have gone straight through an ordinary skylight and into the stairwell, where anyone ascending would have been an easy target. Wolfe's door opened. He stood there in his yellow pajamas, completely composed, with Minerva pressed against his leg. Status? Archie? 2 visitors, one high and one low. Apollo and Mars gave the alert. The bulletproof glass earned its keep. They're gone now. Clarification achieved. Then, he studied the cratered skylight. Someone wished to demonstrate both capability and intent. The telegram was genuine. There is indeed a situation involving Ravenmoor, and someone prefers we not involve ourselves. His eyes moved to mine, which naturally means we shall. Naturally, though I noticed they were careful not to actually hurt anyone. A warning shot, as they say in westerns. Though unlike movie villains, these individuals appear to understand the concept of restraint. He turned back toward his room. In the morning, contact Inspector Kramer. I want to know if any government couriers have met unfortunate ends in the past 48 hours. Also research this Atlantic Heritage Railway and its midnight train to Ravenmoor. If someone is going to such trouble to discourage our interest, the matter must be worth considerable effort to investigate. You planning to leave the brownstone? I kept my voice neutral. Don't be absurd. I plan to have information brought to me, as civilized people do. Good night, Archie. He closed the door. Minerva gave me a look that I swear contained sympathy before she disappeared inside after him. I spent the rest of the night in the office chair, dozing in intervals, with Caesar and Mars rotating through to check on me. At dawn, Fritz emerged from his quarters, took one look at me, and began brewing coffee without comment. One of the many things I valued about Fritz was his understanding that some questions could wait until caffeine had been administered. By 7, I was showered, dressed, and had the morning papers spread across my desk. The Times had it on page 4. Diplomatic courier, found dead on train. The victim, a man named Roger Halford, age 39, employed by the State Department, discovered in a locked sleeping compartment of the Atlantic Heritage Railway's Wednesday midnight service to points north. Cause of death, undetermined, but preliminary examination suggested poisoning. No suspects, no arrests. The train had been stopped and searched in Albany. Nothing found. The article noted that Halford had been carrying diplomatic materials from Washington to a classified destination. Those materials were missing. I was still reading when Wolfe descended at 8, performed his morning inspection of the Dobermans. All 5 presented themselves for his review like soldiers at parade, and settled at his desk. I handed him the paper folded to the article. He read it through twice, set it down, and looked at me. Call Kramer. Inspector Kramer arrived at 9:30, looking like a man who'd been awake for most of the previous night, and planned to stay that way through the current day. He dropped into the red leather chair, declined Fritz's offer of coffee, and glared at Wolfe with the special intensity reserved for people who'd interrupted his already difficult existence. I got your message, he said. You want to explain why you're suddenly interested in a federal case that's technically none of your business. Wolfe pushed the telegram across the desk. Kramer read it, his jaw working around an unlit cigar. When did this arrive? 11:15 last night, I said. Followed at 1:15 by target practice on our skylight. 2 shooters, coordinated retreat. Nobody hurt, thanks to the glass. Kramer's expression darkened. You file a report? And tell them what? Someone fired a warning shot at bulletproof glass and fled. You'd have sent a patrolman to take notes and gone back to sleep. I would have sent a detective. But he didn't push it. Kramer knew how things worked in New York. Resources went where they could do the most good, and a failed shooting at Wolfe's fortress rarely qualified. What do you know about Halford? Only what the Times reported, Wolfe said, which is insufficient. I require context. What was he carrying? Where was he going? And why does someone believe I'm interested in his death? Kramer studied him for a long moment. This stays in this room. Obviously, Halford was transporting a classified document from Washington to a secure facility near the Canadian border. Naval specifications for a new submarine detection system, worth roughly $50 million in development costs, and worth considerably more to certain foreign interests. He paused. The document was in a locked diplomatic case. The case was in Halford's sleeper compartment. The door was locked from inside. When they found him in the morning, dead 6 hours, the case was gone, and the window was open. Locked room murder, I said. Classic. Not quite. The window opens onto the outside of a moving train. Nobody could have climbed in, taken the case, and climbed back out without killing themselves. And nobody could have thrown the case out without leaving trace evidence on the window frame. There wasn't any. So either Halford let someone into his compartment willingly, or someone had a key. Wolfe's eyes half closed. Who had access to keys? The conductor, the sleeping car attendant, and the train manager. All three have been with Atlantic Heritage for 10+ years. All three submitted to polygraph. All three clean. Then the locked case is the real puzzle, Wolfe murmured. How was it opened? Combination lock. Only 3 people knew the combination. Halford, his supervisor in Washington, and the recipient at the secure facility. None of them wrote it down. The case shows no sign of forced entry. I leaned forward. So either Halford gave someone the combination before he died, or someone already knew it. That's the theory the FBI is working on. Kramer stood. Which is why you need to stay out of this, Wolfe. This isn't missing jewelry or a murdered millionaire. This is national security. People play rough. Someone has already played rough at my residence. Wolfe said mildly. I dislike being shot at, Inspector. It offends my sense of domestic tranquility, and the telegram suggests I possess some knowledge or capability relevant to this matter. I prefer to understand why. Maybe they think you'll do exactly what you're doing. Stick your nose in. Then they've created a self-fulfilling prophecy. Wolfe's tone hardened. I want daily reports on the federal investigation. In exchange, I'll share anything I discover that might prove useful, but I will not be warned off my own doorstep by amateur marksmen with melodramatic telegrams. Kramer looked at him, then at me, then back at Wolfe. You're going to do something stupid, aren't you? I never do anything stupid, Inspector. Occasionally I do things that appear stupid to observers with limited information. Wolfe picked up the telegram again. Ravenmoor. Why there specifically? What's in Ravenmoor? A train station, a fish cannery, and about 50 houses. The railway maintains a small depot because wealthy travelers sometimes use it for access to coastal estates. Beyond that, nothing. Nothing visible, Wolfe corrected. But something drew Halford's killer to that route, and something prompted this telegram. Archie, research Ravenmoor. History, industry, notable residents past and present. Also the Atlantic Heritage Railway. Ownership, routes, financial status. You planning a trip? Kramer's voice dripped with sarcasm. Don't be ridiculous. I plan to think about Ravenmoor from the comfort of my office. Now if you'll excuse me, Inspector. My orchids require attention, and this conversation has already extended past my tolerance for repetitive warnings. After Kramer left, I spent the rest of the morning in the office with the dogs rotating through for company. Minerva seemed particularly interested in the research, settling beside my chair and watching the computer screen as if she understood what I was reading. Maybe she did. The Dobermans had a way of absorbing the brownstone's rhythms. They knew when Wolfe was irritated, when Fritz was anxious, and when I was onto something interesting. Ravenmoor's history was thin but peculiar. Founded in 1847 as a whaling village, declined through the early 1900s, experienced a brief resurgence in the 1920s when a shipping magnate named Theodore Blackwell built an estate there and used the railway to transport guests from New York. Blackwell vanished in 1931. Some said suicide after the crash. Others suggested he'd fled to Europe with what remained of his fortune. The estate had been abandoned since then, though local legend claimed it was maintained by a mysterious trust that paid property taxes through a law firm in Boston. The Atlantic Heritage Railway was more interesting. Privately owned by a consortium of investors, it operated luxury sleeper service on 3 routes: New York to coastal Maine, New York to the Adirondacks, and New York to Montreal. The Ravenmoor line ran twice weekly, Wednesday and Saturday nights, departing Grand Central at midnight, arriving in Ravenmoor at 8 a.m., first-class service only, maximum capacity 40 passengers, average occupancy 12. The Wednesday night run, the one Halford died on, had been carrying 7 passengers besides the victim. I was reading through the passenger manifest when Diana barked from the front hallway, her pattern for someone approaching the door with purpose. I glanced at the security monitor. A young woman, maybe 30, dark coat, no obvious weapons, examining our brass nameplate with intense interest. The doorbell rang. I went to answer it, Caesar materializing beside me like a shadow with teeth. Through the one-way glass I could see her more clearly, professional bearing, expensive but understated clothing, and eyes that moved constantly, cataloging everything. I opened the door 6 inches, enough to talk, not enough to invite entry. Yes? My name is Lucinda Prescott. Her voice was steady, educated, with a faint Maine accent underneath. I need to speak with Nero Wolfe about the night train to Ravenmoor. I left her standing on the stoop while I went to consult with Wolfe. He was in the plant rooms, naturally, inspecting a cattleya that was considering whether to bloom. Theodore Horstman, the orchid nurse, was misting nearby plants and pretending not to listen. Woman at the door, I said. Lucinda Prescott, claiming she needs to talk about the Ravenmoor train. She's nervous but controlled. Also, she looked at the bulletproof glass in the front windows and didn't seem surprised. Wolfe didn't look up from the cattleya. What would surprise her? Good question. You want to see her? Does she look capable of assassination? Everyone looks capable of assassination with the right motivation, but she's not carrying anything obvious. Bring her in. Standard precautions. He finally glanced at me. And Archie, have Minerva present. People are more honest when they remember others are watching. I went back downstairs, opened the door fully, and gestured Lucinda Prescott inside. Caesar and Diana flanked the hallway like a receiving line. She looked at them with the expression of someone who'd expected exactly this arrangement. Mr. Goodwin? That's right. This way. I led her to the office, Caesar following at a discreet distance. She took the red leather chair without being asked, sign of either confidence or familiarity with detective procedures. Minerva emerged from beneath Wolfe's desk and sat beside the chair, not threatening, just present. He keeps Dobermans in the office, Prescott observed. The brownstone is more of a collaboration than a residence. They have their own opinions about visitors. I imagine they do. She placed her handbag on her lap, hands visible, professional courtesy. How long until Mr. Wolfe joins us? Depends on the orchids. Could be 5 minutes, could be 30. While we wait, you could tell me why you're here. I'd prefer to explain only once. Then we'll sit in comfortable silence. I settled behind my desk. Though I should mention that Nero Wolfe doesn't work for free, that we require a retainer before we start, and that he absolutely will not leave this brownstone under any circumstances, so if your case requires travel, you're wasting your time. Something flickered behind her eyes. I was told he could be by whom? I'd prefer not to say. Well, that's a promising start. I leaned back. Let me guess. Someone mentioned Wolfe might be interested in the Halford murder, suggested you come here with information, maybe even provided this address. You're supposed to be the bait that pulls him into something. How am I doing? She went very still. That's partially accurate. Which part is inaccurate? I'm not bait, Mr. Goodwin. I'm a concerned citizen who happens to know things about Ravenmoor that might be relevant to a murder investigation. Such as why Theodore Blackwell's estate is still maintained. Such as what the Atlantic Heritage Railway transports besides passengers. And such as why a diplomatic courier with classified materials was specifically routed through a town most people have never heard of. She met my eyes. I came here because I believe Nero Wolfe is the only detective in New York who might actually solve this before someone else dies. The elevator descended at that moment. Wolfe's timing was impeccable as always. He entered, surveyed Prescott with his first visual encounter, and proceeded to his chair. It wheezed as he settled. Minerva moved to position herself beside him, her presence a reminder that this office operated under its own rules. Miss Prescott, Wolfe said, you've traveled from Ravenmoor. How did you? She stopped. The accent, and the mud on your shoes, which contains a distinctive mineral composition found in coastal clay. Also, you smell faintly of salt air and fish, though you've clearly showered since your arrival in New York. Your coat has a waterproof treatment popular in maritime communities, and you're carrying considerable tension in your shoulders, suggesting either travel fatigue or stress. He laced his fingers over his stomach. Shall we dispense with preliminaries? Why are you here? She took a breath. My father was the station master at Ravenmoor for 30 years. He died 3 months ago. Heart attack. Officially, though I have my doubts. Before he died, he told me things about the railway, about the estate, about what's been happening in that town for decades. I didn't believe him at first. Then Roger Halford was murdered, and I realized my father had been telling the truth. What truth specifically? That the Atlantic Heritage Railway isn't just a luxury train service. It's been transporting stolen goods, black market materials, and classified information for at least 20 years. The Ravenmoor station is a transfer point. Passengers board in New York with materials that disappear by the time the train reaches Maine. My father saw it happen hundreds of times. He kept records. Wolfe's eyebrows rose a millimeter. Why didn't he report this to authorities? He tried. In 1998, he contacted the FBI. 2 weeks later, someone broke into his house and destroyed all his evidence. He got the message, keep quiet or die. So he kept quiet until his conscience overwhelmed his fear. She opened her handbag slowly, withdrew a small leather journal, and placed it on Wolfe's desk. This is his personal log from the last 5 years. Names, dates, descriptions of suspicious transfers. He hid it in his attic and told me about it the day before he died. I picked up the journal and flipped through it. Neat handwriting, methodical entries, each one describing passengers boarding with locked cases or packages that were somehow gone by morning. Different conductors, different attendants, but always the same route, Wednesday and Saturday nights to Ravenmoor. Wolfe examined a few pages, his expression unreadable. You believe your father was murdered? I know he was. The coroner said natural causes, but my father was healthy. He jogged every morning, ate well, had no history of heart problems. Then suddenly, 2 days after he told me about the journal, he has a massive coronary in his sleep. Her voice hardened. Someone knew he was about to talk. And you've brought this to me because the FBI won't listen to me, because the local police in Ravenmoor are compromised, and because yesterday someone followed me from Maine to New York. I think they know I have my father's journal. She glanced at Minerva, then back at Wolfe. I need help, Mr. Wolfe, not just for me, but to stop whatever's happening on that train before more people die. Wolfe was silent for 10 seconds, his eyes closed. Then, what do you want me to do? Investigate. Find out who killed Halford and my father. Expose what's happening on the Ravenmoor line. From here. However you work. I was told you're effective. I am effective from my office, Miss Prescott. I do not travel. I do not board trains. I do not visit coastal towns, no matter how critical the evidence might be. He opened his eyes. However, I can investigate from here using associates, research and logical deduction, but I require compensation. My fee is $10,000 plus expenses. She didn't flinch. I have $5,000 immediately and can secure the rest within a week. That will suffice as a retainer. Archie, draw up the standard contract. He looked at her again. One more thing, Miss Prescott. You mentioned being followed. Describe the individual. Medium height, dark coat, professional bearing. I noticed him at the train station in Portland, again on the train to New York, and once more near my hotel this morning. He never approached, just watched. Did he follow you here? I don't think so. I took precautions. Cab to the subway to another cab, then walked the final 6 blocks. Wise but insufficient against a determined professional. Wolfe's tone was matter of fact. You'll stay in this brownstone tonight. Archie will prepare the guest room. Tomorrow we'll arrange more secure accommodations, but for now, you're safest here where we have 5 Dobermans, bulletproof windows, and a security system designed for paranoid millionaires. I couldn't impose. You're not imposing. You're accepting common sense. Someone murdered your father and is tracking you across state lines. This brownstone is the closest thing to a fortress in Manhattan. You'll sleep here, eat Fritz's cooking, and in the morning we'll begin working on your problem. He glanced at me. Archie, have Caesar escort Miss Prescott to the guest room. Then contact Saul Panzer. I want him to start surveillance on the Atlantic Heritage Railway offices in Grand Central tonight. After I'd settled Prescott upstairs with Caesar standing guard outside her door and Fritz fussing over her comfort, I returned to find Wolfe reading the station master's journal with intense concentration. Minerva had her head on his knee, and he was absently scratching behind her ears, a sign he was deeply engaged with the problem. This is considerable, he said without looking up. Her father documented 47 suspicious transfers over 5 years. Different passengers each time. Different materials, but consistent patterns. Wednesday and Saturday nights. Always between midnight and dawn. Always concluded by the time the train reaches Ravenmoor. He turned a page, and 3 weeks ago, he noted something new. A diplomatic courier with a locked case, boarding in New York, scheduled to reach an unnamed destination. He wrote suspicious, unusual route for government materials. Halford. Presumably, which means whoever killed Halford knew the station master was taking notes. They eliminated both problems simultaneously. You think Prescott's in real danger? I think everyone connected to this situation is in real danger, including us. He closed the journal. This isn't a simple murder case, Archie. This is organized, systematic criminal activity, with sufficient resources to corrupt railway staff, eliminate witnesses, and target a government courier. And now they're aware that we're asking questions. Hence the warning shot last night. Precisely. They wanted to discourage us before we became too invested. Now that Prescott has arrived with evidence, they'll escalate. He looked at me directly. I want every security measure activated. Full alarm system, all windows shuttered after dark, dogs on rotation every 4 hours, and contact Inspector Kramer. Inform him we now have a client and are officially investigating the Halford murder. He won't like it, but he'll provide some police protection. You seriously think they'll try something here? I think they're committed to keeping secrets worth killing for. Whether they're foolish enough to assault this brownstone remains to be seen. He pushed back from the desk. Now get Saul on the phone. We need eyes on that railway office before they realize we're watching. I made the call. Saul Panzer, the best freelance detective in New York, answered on the second ring and agreed to set up surveillance immediately. Then I called Kramer, who was predictably furious that we'd taken the case, but grudgingly promised to have a patrol car make regular passes on West 35th Street. By 11 p.m. the brownstone was buttoned up tight, steel shutters over every window, alarms active, dogs distributed in defensive positions. Fritz had gone to bed nervously, clutching a fire poker. Prescott was presumably asleep upstairs, and I was in the office with Wolfe, reviewing the station master's journal page by page, looking for patterns. That's when Diana started barking from the basement. Not her warning bark, but her alarm bark, the one that meant immediate threat. I was moving before Wolfe finished standing. Down the stairs, into the basement, where Diana had her attention fixed on the reinforced service entrance. Through the bulletproof glass I could see a figure crouched beside the lock, working on something with mechanical precision. Company, I called up to Wolfe. Professional lockpick at the rear entrance. Don't engage, observe and document. I grabbed the camera we kept for evidence purposes and started filming. The figure was good, methodical, patient, using tools I couldn't identify from this distance. But the lock was designed to resist this exact kind of attention. After 90 seconds, the figure gave up, stood, and vanished into the alley darkness. Diana was still growling when I went back upstairs. Wolfe had activated the security monitor system and was reviewing footage from the external cameras. He froze the image. A man, medium height, dark coat, professional bearing. The same description Prescott had given for her tale. They're testing our defenses, Wolfe said quietly, determining what we're protecting and how serious we are about protecting it. This won't be their last attempt. Should I wake Prescott and tell her? No. Let her sleep. She'll need rest for what's coming. He shut down the monitor, but make sure Caesar and Mars remain at the doors all night, and Archie sleep in the office. Keep your pistol close. You think they'll try again tonight? I think, Wolfe said, heading for the elevator, that someone is very concerned about what we might discover if we pursue this case, which naturally means we must pursue it with absolute determination. The elevator closed. Minerva looked at me with what I interpreted as sympathy, then followed her master upstairs. I settled into the office chair, pistol in the desk drawer, with Caesar and Diana flanking me like sentries. Outside, New York continued its usual nocturnal symphony. Inside, the brownstone held its breath and waited. At 3 a.m., Apollo barked once from the roof access, then silence. The long night was just beginning. Morning arrived with Fritz's coffee, which was fortunate, because I'd spent the night in an uncomfortable chair watching shadows that might or might not have been threats. Caesar and Diana had maintained perfect vigilance, rotating watches without complaint. At dawn, When the steel shutters opened automatically and weak October sunlight filtered into the office, I felt like a soldier at the end of a siege. Wolfe descended at 8 to find me disheveled, unshaven, and examining the exterior security footage from overnight. 3 more attempts at different entry points, the basement window at 1:40, the service entrance again at 2:15, and a particularly ambitious effort at 3 a.m. to access the roof via the neighboring building. That last one had triggered Apollo's alert. "They're methodical," I told Wolfe as he settled at his desk. "Professional reconnaissance. They're not trying to break in yet, just mapping our defenses." "Establishing our vulnerabilities," Wolfe corrected. He accepted coffee from Fritz, who looked like he'd slept even less than I had. "They'll return tonight with a comprehensive strategy." Comforting thought. Reality, Archie. These are not impulsive criminals. They're executing a calculated response to our involvement. He sipped his coffee. "Where's Miss Prescott?" "Still sleeping. Caesar's outside her door." "Good. Let her rest. Meanwhile, contact Saul. I want his initial surveillance report. Also call Inspector Kramer and request the complete passenger manifest from Halford's train. Names, occupations, boarding points, destinations." I was reaching for the phone when Lucinda Prescott appeared in the doorway, looking remarkably composed for someone who'd been followed across state lines and was now sleeping in a detective's fortress. She wore the same professional outfit as yesterday, but she'd clearly showered and pulled herself together. "I heard voices," she said. "I hope I'm not intruding." "You're a client," Wolfe replied. "Clients are never intruding when they arrive for breakfast. Fritz, please set another place. Miss Prescott will join us." Breakfast was a silent affair. Wolfe didn't believe in conversation over food, but afterward, when Fritz had cleared the plates and fresh coffee had been poured, Wolfe turned his attention to Prescott. "You mentioned your father tried to report the railway activities in 19... Who did he contact specifically?" "An FBI field agent in Boston. A man named..." She frowned, concentrating. "Garrett. Agent Russell Garrett. My father met with him twice, showed him preliminary evidence. Garrett seemed interested, promised to investigate. Then nothing happened, and 2 weeks later, my father's records were destroyed." "Do you believe Agent Garrett betrayed him?" "I don't know. Maybe Garrett tried to investigate and was blocked. Maybe he was compromised, or maybe the FBI simply didn't take it seriously." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "After that, my father stopped trusting official channels. Understandably." Wolfe was quiet for a moment. "The journal mentions 47 suspicious transfers. Did any particular names or patterns recur?" 3 passengers appeared multiple times over the years. My father noted them because they always traveled alone, always carried locked cases, and always seemed to know the train staff personally. She pulled out a folded paper from her pocket, notes apparently, that she'd made from her father's journal. "A man named Philip Rutledge, businessman, travel 4 times a year. A woman named Catherine Ashford, listed as a journalist, traveled twice annually. And someone who used different names, James Morrison, John Morris, Jacob Moore, but my father was certain it was the same person each time because of a distinctive scar on his left hand." I wrote down the names. Scarred hand, multiple identities, sounds like professional work. "Sounds like espionage," Wolfe said. "The pattern is clear. The railway isn't just moving physical goods, they're moving information. Halford was carrying naval specifications, highly valuable intelligence. If the railway has been facilitating similar transfers for years, they've built a sophisticated network." He looked at Prescott. "The estate in Ravenmoor. Your father's journal mentions it several times in the context of deliveries. What did he mean?" "Packages would sometimes be taken off the train at Ravenmoor and transported to Blackwell's estate. My father saw it happen at dawn when he opened the station. A car would be waiting, unmarked, and railway staff would load materials directly into the trunk. He assumed the estate was being used as a warehouse or distribution point. For stolen classified materials," I added. "Perfect location, isolated, allegedly abandoned, but actually maintained by a mysterious trust. Nobody would look twice at a decaying mansion in the middle of nowhere." The phone rang. I answered Saul Panzer, calling with his first surveillance report. "Archie, I've been watching the Atlantic Heritage Railway office since midnight. One interesting visitor at 6 a.m., a well-dressed man, early 50s, British accent, spent 30 minutes inside. I followed him when he left. He went directly to an apartment building on Park Avenue. Building registry lists the tenant as Sir Edmund Westbrook, former British trade attaché. Diplomat? I glanced at Wolfe, who was listening intently. Retired, officially, but his name's come up in a few intelligence circles over the years. Suspicion but no proof of involvement in classified information trading. If he's connected to the railway, that elevates the significance considerably. Keep watching. And Saul? Be careful, these people have already demonstrated they're willing to kill. Noted. I'll check in tonight. I hung up and relayed the information. Wolfe's eyes had that particular gleam that meant pieces were fitting together in his mental architecture. A British diplomat with suspected intelligence connections, visiting a railway office that's been facilitating illegal transfers for 20 years, and simultaneously, a government courier carrying naval specifications is murdered on that same railway. The connections are too numerous to be coincidental. He looked at Prescott. Your father was correct to be frightened. This isn't simple theft. This is organized espionage with international implications. Which means, I said, that the people trying to breach our brownstone last night have resources that go beyond ordinary criminals. We're dealing with professionals who've evaded detection for 2 decades. Precisely why we must be systematic in our investigation. Wolfe's tone hardened. Archie, contact Inspector Kramer again. Request that he investigate Sir Edmund Westbrook discreetly. Background, associates' financial records if possible. Also, I want complete information on the train staff, conductor attendance management. Focus on anyone who's been with the railway for more than 10 years. If this operation has sustained itself for 2 decades, there must be inside cooperation. Already on it. I was making notes. What about the 3 recurring passengers Prescott mentioned? Research them thoroughly. If they've been traveling that route regularly, they're either customers or couriers for the intelligence network. Either way, they'll have patterns we can exploit. A knock at the office door. Fritz, looking troubled. Excuse me, but there's a delivery man at the front entrance. He says he has a package for Miss Prescott. Should I accept it? Wolfe and I exchanged glances. Prescott went pale. Nobody knows I'm here, she said. I didn't tell anyone. Except whoever followed you yesterday, I reminded her. Caesar, front door. The Doberman moved instantly, positioning himself in the hallway. I went to the security monitor. Through the external camera, I could see a delivery truck parked outside. A man in standard courier uniform holding a small package. He looked legitimate, but then again professional operatives often did. Don't accept it, Wolfe said. Tell him to leave it on the stoop. We'll examine it from a safe distance. I relayed the message through the intercom. The delivery man shrugged, set the package down, and departed. I waited until his truck disappeared around the corner, then suited up in the protective gear we kept for exactly this kind of situation, thanks to past experiences with vindictive criminals who favored explosives. The package was small, professionally wrapped, addressed to Lucinda Prescott in care of Nero Wolfe. No return address. I carried it carefully to the basement workbench, where we had equipment for examining suspicious items. Caesar followed, maintaining watchful distance. X-ray showed no obvious explosives or mechanical devices. The package contained only paper. I opened it with extreme caution. Inside, a single photograph, black and white, recent. It showed the Ravenmoor train station at dawn, and standing on the platform was a figure I recognized from the security footage. The man with the dark coat, who'd attempted our service entrance lock. Written on the back in neat handwriting, "Your father took unnecessary risks, Miss Prescott. Please don't make the same mistake." I brought it upstairs. Prescott looked at the photo and started shaking. That's the Ravenmoor station. That's where my father worked. It's a message, Wolfe said quietly. They're confirming they killed your father, and they're warning you to cease this investigation. It's also a demonstration of capability. They've located you here despite your precautions. They know your movements, and they're unafraid of direct contact. He looked at me. Archie, call Kramer immediately. This constitutes a direct threat. I want police protection for this brownstone starting tonight. They said they'd make regular passes. Not regular passes. Full protection. Officers stationed at both ends of the street. 24-hour surveillance. I don't care if Kramer has to requisition half the department. Someone has just threatened a client under my roof, and I will not tolerate it. I'd never heard Wolfe quite that angry. His voice remained level, but there was steel underneath that suggested whoever had sent that photograph had made a serious tactical error. You could threaten Wolfe all you wanted. He'd respond with calm calculation. But threaten someone under his protection, in his brownstone, and you'd triggered something considerably more dangerous. I called Kramer, who was equally furious, but for different reasons. You've dragged the NYPD into an international espionage case, Wolfe. Do you understand the kind of paperwork this generates? I understand that someone is threatening a client in my home, Inspector. Politics and paperwork are your concern. My concern is keeping Miss Prescott alive long enough to expose whoever murdered her father and Roger Halford. Now, will you provide the protection I've requested? Or shall I contact the Commissioner directly? Long silence. Then, I'll have officers there by 6 p.m. But Wolfe? When this blows up in your face, and it will, don't expect me to clean up the mess. Noted, Inspector. Thank you. The rest of the day passed in tense preparation. I researched the 3 recurring passengers, while Wolfe studied the station master's journal with the intensity of a scholar examining ancient manuscripts. Fritz prepared an elaborate dinner. His way of coping with stress was through cooking, and the Dobermans maintained their vigilant rotation, sensing the increased tension in the brownstone's atmosphere. By 5 p.m., we had preliminary information on all 3 passengers. Philip Rutledge, businessman, import-export, offices in New York and London. Clean record, no obvious criminal connections. But his company had filed bankruptcy in 2003 and mysteriously recovered within 6 months with no clear source of capital. Catherine Ashford, freelance journalist, specialized in political and military affairs, published regularly in small journals, occasionally in larger outlets. Traveled extensively to Eastern Europe and Asia. No criminal record, but her articles often contained information that seemed to require inside sources in intelligence communities. The man with the scarred hand. No clear identity. Multiple passports flagged at various borders over the years, always using variations of the same initials, JM. Interpol had a file on James Morrison for suspected intelligence work, but no arrests, no confirmed activities. They're all intelligence operatives, I concluded. Different methods, different networks, but all involved in classified information trading. And all using the Atlantic Heritage Railway as their transport mechanism, Wolfe added. The railway provides perfect cover, luxury service, exclusive clientele, routes through isolated areas. Materials can be transferred without airport security or border checkpoints. He closed the journal. The question remains, who's orchestrating this network? The railway can't be operating independently. Someone with substantial resources and connections is coordinating these transfers. Westbrook, I suggested, former diplomat with intelligence connections. Possibly. Or he's merely one node in a larger network. We need more information about the railway itself, ownership structure, financial backing, operational control. At 6 p.m., 2 NYPD patrol cars arrived as promised. Kramer had sent 4 officers who took positions at both ends of 35th Street, with instructions to report any suspicious activity. I went out to brief them, with Mars accompanying me for moral support, or perhaps intimidation. The officers eyed the Doberman with professional respect. Expecting trouble? The senior officer asked. We've had 3 attempted breaches in 2 nights, plus a threatening photograph delivered this morning. So yes, definitely expecting trouble. What kind of case is this? The kind where we don't discuss details with officers who might accidentally leak them to the wrong people. No offense, but this involves classified materials and people who've already committed murder. The less you know, the safer you are. He nodded, understanding. We'll keep watch. Anyone approaches this building, they'll be stopped and questioned. Back inside, Wolfe had finished his pre-dinner conference with the Orchids and was settling at the table where Fritz had prepared roasted duck with cherry sauce. Prescott joined us, looking steadier than she had that morning, but still clearly shaken by the photograph. They killed my father, she said quietly. That message confirms it. It confirms they believe they killed him, Wolfe corrected, which is not quite the same thing. They may be lying to intimidate you. You think he died naturally? I think we lack sufficient evidence to determine cause of death without an autopsy. But either way, these individuals are responsible for Roger Halford's murder, and that's enough to warrant complete exposure. He cut into his duck with surgical precision. Tomorrow, I want you to return to Ravenmoor. What? She set down her fork. You just said I was in danger. You are, which is why you'll travel with Saul Panzer as protection and will maintain constant communication with this office. But we need someone on the ground in Ravenmoor who can investigate the estate, interview locals, and determine exactly how materials are being transferred from the train. Your father's journal provides valuable context, but we need current intelligence. Mr. Wolfe, I interrupted, sending her back into the danger zone seems counterproductive. Sending her back with professional protection and a clear mission is strategic. She knows Ravenmoor, knows the people, and won't attract the same attention that Saul alone might generate. Meanwhile, you and I will continue investigating from here, following the money, tracking the passengers, identifying the network structure. He looked at Prescott. The choice is yours, naturally. But if you want to find your father's killers and stop this organization, we need information only available in Ravenmoor. She thought for a long moment. I'll go, but I want regular check-ins, every 6 hours. Agreed. Archie will coordinate communication protocol. Saul will be armed and will have authority to extract you immediately if the situation deteriorates. Wolfe resumed eating. We'll arrange departure for tomorrow morning. That gives us tonight to prepare and to see whether our visitors return for another attempt at the brownstone. They did. At 2 a.m., all 5 Dobermans started barking simultaneously, the signal for coordinated assault. I was out of bed and down the stairs in seconds, pistol drawn, to find Wolfe already in the office in his yellow pajamas, calmly observing the security monitors. 4 figures this time, 2 at the front entrance, 2 at the rear. Professional formation, synchronized timing, equipped with sophisticated lockpicking tools. But before they could make serious progress, the NYPD officers responded, sirens wailing, lights flashing, and suddenly our would-be intruders were running in 4 different directions. 3 escaped. 1 was tackled by a particularly enthusiastic officer right in front of our stoop. Caesar watched through the window with what I swear was approval. Kramer arrived 20 minutes later, furious and triumphant. We got one. Professional operative, no ID, refusing to talk, but we got him. Good, Wolfe said. Hold him for 24 hours on trespassing charges. By then we'll have more evidence to charge him with conspiracy to commit murder. You planning to share what evidence that might be? When I have it, Inspector, you'll be the first to know. Wolfe's smile was thin. Until then, I suggest you interrogate your prisoner regarding his knowledge of the Atlantic Heritage Railway, Sir Edmund Westbrook, and the murder of Roger Halford. One of those topics might inspire cooperation. The rest of the night passed without incident. By morning, I'd made arrangements for Prescott and Saul to travel to Ravenmoor on the morning train, the regular service, not the midnight route. Fritz had packed them provisions that would have sustained a small army, and Wolfe had given Prescott explicit instructions about what to look for at the Blackwell estate. Pay attention to access points, he told her. How materials would be transported from the station to the estate. What infrastructure exists. Roads, private paths, storage facilities. Also interview anyone who might have seen activity there over the years. The estate may be officially abandoned, but someone is maintaining it, and locals always notice. She nodded, determination replacing fear. I'll find out who killed my father, Mr. Wolfe, whatever it takes. Just don't take unnecessary risks, he replied. Dead heroes are considerably less useful than careful investigators. After they left, the brownstone settled into investigative routine. I continued researching the railway's ownership structure while Wolfe reviewed every detail of the station master's journal. By afternoon, we developed a clearer picture. The Atlantic Heritage Railway was owned by a holding company registered in Delaware, Heritage Transport Group. The holding company's board consisted of 5 members, but 3 were nominal executives, lawyers and accountants, who clearly had no operational involvement. The other 2 names were more interesting, Philip Rutledge and Sir Edmund Westbrook. They're not just using the railway, I said. They own it. The whole operation is purpose-built for intelligence trafficking. Precisely, and Roger Halford's murder suggests a catastrophic breach in their protocol. Someone either betrayed the network, or Halford discovered something he shouldn't have. Wolfe's eyes were half closed, his thinking position. The question is, why route classified naval specifications through Ravenmoor? Why not simply deliver them to their destination through normal channels? Because normal channels have oversight. The Atlantic Heritage Railway operates in a grey area, luxury private service with minimal regulation. Perfect for circumventing security protocols. Yes, but who corrupted Halford's route? Who convinced the State Department to send classified materials via a train rather than secure government transport? That was the right question, and neither of us had an answer yet. But we would. Wolfe didn't leave problems unsolved. At 6 p.m., Prescott called from Ravenmoor. Her voice was tense but controlled. "We're here. The estate it's not abandoned, Mr. Wolfe. There are fresh tire tracks, recently mowed grass, and one of the outbuildings has a new lock. Someone's using this place actively. Can you access the building? Saul is working on the lock now. He says it's commercial grade, not residential. The kind you'd use for security, not convenience. Exercise caution. If you encounter anyone, withdraw immediately." "Understood. I'll call again in 6 hours." She disconnected. Wolfe sat in silence for a full minute, then turned to me. "They're moving faster than I anticipated. The attack last night, the photograph, now increased security at the estate. They know we're close to something significant." Which means, Wolfe said quietly, "that they'll escalate again, and next time, they won't be satisfied with warning shots and photographs. Archie, I want all security measures at maximum. No one enters this brownstone without explicit clearance, and keep the Dobermans on high alert if they sense anything unusual. I want immediate notification." "You really think they'll try again?" "I think they're desperate, and desperate people make catastrophic decisions. We need to solve this case before they decide the only solution is to eliminate everyone involved, including us." That night, the brownstone felt like a fortress under siege, which, technically, it was. Thursday morning arrived with rain, the cold, persistent kind that turns New York into a study in grey gradations. I was in the office reviewing financial records on Heritage Transport Group when Prescott called, 7 hours after her previous check-in. 1 hour late. "Archie." Her voice was strained. "We found something." "Where have you been? You were supposed to call at midnight." "We've been inside the estate's outbuilding. Saul finally got the lock open around 11. But what we found? Mr. Wolfe needs to hear this directly." I put her on speaker. Wolfe had just descended from the plant rooms and was settling at his desk with his morning beer. All 5 Dobermans were present, an unusual congregation that suggested they'd sensed the tension in my voice when I'd answered the phone. "Miss Prescott," Wolfe said, "report. The outbuilding is a communications center. Sophisticated equipment, encryption devices, radio transmitters, computer terminals, linked to satellite systems. Everything's active, everything's current. This isn't an abandoned estate, Mr. Wolfe. It's a functioning intelligence operation." Wolfe's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened on the beer glass. "What else?" "Filing cabinets containing transaction records going back 15 years. Hundreds of transfers, all documented, dates, materials, recipients, payment amounts. It's a complete archive of the railway's illegal activities." She paused, "And there are personnel files. Names of operatives, handlers, contacts in various governments. Halford's name is here, Mr. Wolfe. He wasn't just a victim, he was part of the network. He'd been working for them for 7 years." That landed like a physical blow. I exchanged glances with Wolfe, whose eyes had gone very cold. Halford was a double agent. According to these files, yes, he'd been passing classified materials through the railway for years, receiving payment through offshore accounts. But 3 weeks ago, he apparently tried to back out. There's a memo here discussing the Halford problem and recommending permanent termination. Her voice wavered. "They killed him because he wanted to stop." "Did you photograph these documents?" "Everything. Saul has over 300 images on his camera. We're preparing to leave now, but there's something else you should know. There are personnel files for people currently working in the State Department, the CIA, and the Pentagon. This network isn't just facilitating intelligence transfers, they've penetrated multiple government agencies." Wolfe was silent for 10 seconds. Then, "Leave immediately. Do not return to the station. Have Saul drive you directly to Portland and take the first available train to New York. These people have already demonstrated their willingness to kill, and now you've discovered their complete operational archive. They'll know you've been there." "How?" "We were careful." "They'll know because they're professionals, Miss Prescott. Security cameras, motion sensors, or simply routine checks of their facility. You have perhaps 2 hours head start. Use them wisely. And Miss Prescott, If anyone attempts to stop you before you reach New York, Saul has my permission to use whatever force is necessary." "Understood." She disconnected. I looked at Wolfe. If Halford was part of their network, that changes everything. He wasn't transporting classified materials to a legitimate destination. He was stealing them for profit. And when his conscience finally overwhelmed his greed, they eliminated him as a security risk. Wolfe's tone was grim. "This isn't espionage in service of ideology, Archie. This is simple criminal enterprise dressed in intelligence trappings. These people are selling American secrets to the highest bidder, using a luxury railway as their distribution system, and corrupting government employees to supply materials. Which means we're not just dealing with foreign agents, we're dealing with American traitors." "Precisely. And traitors are considerably more dangerous than foreign operatives because they understand our systems, our procedures, our vulnerabilities." He stood abruptly. "Call Inspector Kramer. Tell him to contact the FBI immediately. They need to coordinate protection for Miss Prescott and Mr. Panzer during their return journey. Also request that he obtain warrants for the arrest of Sir Edmund Westbrook and Philip Rutledge. If they're on the railways board, they're directly complicit in Halford's murder." I made the calls. Kramer was surprisingly cooperative. Apparently the prisoner they'd arrested 2 nights ago had finally started talking, confirming connections between the railway and international intelligence trafficking. The FBI was already assembling a task force. "They're moving fast," Kramer said. "But Wolfe, you need to understand that this case is way beyond your usual scope. These people have resources we can't even imagine. If they think you're a serious threat, they won't stop at warning shots." "They've already escalated beyond warnings, Inspector. The question is whether we solve this case before they eliminate everyone who knows too much, including your prisoner, Miss Prescott, and anyone else who might testify against them. Which is why the FBI wants to take over completely. They're requesting you turn over all evidence and step back from active investigation." Denied. This is my client's case, and I don't abandon clients because bureaucrats get nervous. Tell the FBI they're welcome to coordinate with my investigation, but I won't be sidelined. He paused. "Now about those warrants?" Kramer sighed. "I'll push it through, but don't blame me when this explodes." The rest of the morning was spent reviewing the photographs Saul transmitted electronically from a secure location in Portland. The documentation was devastating. Detailed records of 57 government employees who'd been compromised over 15 years, transaction logs totaling over 200 classified materials transferred, and payment records showing approximately $80 million distributed to various operatives and handlers. The personnel files were the most chilling. Each contained background information, recruitment details, and operational history. Halford's file confirmed Prescott's report. Recruited in 2018 after financial difficulties, paid progressively larger amounts for increasingly sensitive materials, attempted to withdraw in early October, deemed a security risk, and eliminated aboard the train he'd used for 7 years of treason. "They killed him with poison," Wolfe observed, studying Halford's file. "Specifically a compound that mimics natural cardiac arrest, difficult to detect without specific toxicology tests, which are rarely performed on government employees with security clearances, too many political complications. Elegant solution from their perspective. Same method they might have used on Prescott's father," I added. "Heart attack, no investigation, case closed." "Almost certainly, which suggests their operational protocol: eliminate risks quietly, avoid attention, maintain the network's integrity." He closed the file. "But they made an error with Halford. They killed him aboard their own train, in a locked compartment, creating a mystery that drew official investigation. If they'd simply poisoned him at home, his death would have been ruled natural causes and forgotten. So why kill him on the train? Perhaps they didn't intend to. Perhaps Halford suspected their intentions and attempted to flee via the railway. Ironic choice, given his history with them, and they were forced to act during transit. Or perhaps they wanted to retrieve the classified materials he was carrying before anyone else discovered them." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "The locked diplomatic case. Who opened it, Archie?" "According to Kramer, it showed no signs of forced entry, and only 3 people knew the combination. Which means Halford gave them the combination before he died, either voluntarily or under duress. They poisoned him, waited for the poison to take effect, opened the case, and removed the materials. He drummed his fingers on the desk. But where did those materials go? The train was searched in Albany. Nothing was found." "Offloaded at Ravenmoor," I suggested. taken to the estate for processing and distribution. Possible, but risky. Railway staff would have noticed materials being removed from a crime scene, unless, he stopped considering, unless the materials never reached Ravenmoor at all, unless they were removed from the train at an earlier stop. I pulled up the railway schedule. Wednesday night service makes 4 stops between New York and Ravenmoor: Poughkeepsie, Albany, Burlington, Portland. The body was discovered in Albany, but Halford could have been dead for hours by then. If someone removed the materials at Poughkeepsie, then the search in Albany was futile because the materials were already gone. Wolfe nodded slowly. That's the operational method. Kill the courier, remove the materials at the first stop, continue the journey as if nothing happened. By the time the body is discovered, the evidence has vanished and the killer has established an alibi by remaining aboard. Which means the killer was one of the other passengers, or one of the railway staff who've been complicit in this network for years. Wolfe picked up the personnel files again. According to these documents, 3 current Atlantic Heritage employees are confirmed operatives: the senior conductor Nathan Cross, a sleeper car attendant named Isabel Mendez, and the train manager, a man named Leonard Huxley. All 3 have been with the railway for over a decade. All 3 have received payments totaling 6 figures over that period. So we arrest them and force them to testify. Arresting them is premature. We have documentary evidence of their involvement, but we lack direct proof of their participation in Halford's murder. Unless we can demonstrate that one of them opened that diplomatic case and removed the materials, they'll claim ignorance and hire expensive attorneys. He set down the files. No, we need a different approach. We need to identify which specific individual killed Halford and removed the materials. And to do that, we need to reconstruct the murder itself. Motive, method, opportunity. Which means we need to be on that train. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Wolfe looked at me with an expression that suggested I'd just proposed something obscene. Don't be ridiculous, Archie. I will not board a train to conduct field work like some ambulatory detective. We'll investigate from here, using intermediaries and documented evidence. How? Prescott's photographs give us historical context, but they don't show us how Halford was killed or who did it. The FBI can arrest Westbrook and Rutledge based on ownership records, but that doesn't solve the actual murder. And if the railway staff are involved, they'll destroy evidence the moment they realize we're investigating. I leaned forward. You've solved locked room murders before, but always by examining the room. This room is moving at 60 miles an hour through 4 states. We need to be on that train to understand how it was done. Then send Saul. Saul's excellent, but he can't reconstruct a murder scene the way you can. He can't interrogate suspects with your precision. And he can't force a confession by sheer intellectual intimidation. I kept my voice level. This case requires Nero Wolfe, not a proxy. You know it, and so do I. I also know that leaving this brownstone is an exercise in discomfort that I've avoided for years with excellent reason. Trains are cramped, the food is mediocre, and I would be separated from my orchids, my comfortable chair and my Dobermans.
Take the Dobermans with you.
That stopped him. He stared at me as if I'd suggested painting the brownstone pink. Take the dogs aboard a luxury train? That's absurd. Why? You own this case, you're paying for the tickets, and the Atlantic Heritage Railway allows service animals. Caesar and Mars as protection, Apollo and Diana as scouts, Minerva as your personal attendant. They're better security than any human bodyguard, and they'll intimidate suspects more effectively than weapons. I smiled. Besides, you've always said the Dobermans are extensions of this brownstone soul. If you must travel, take your soul with you. Wolfe sat in profound silence, his eyes closed, his fingers laced over his stomach. It was the posture of deep internal debate. Comfort versus necessity, safety versus justice, routine versus responsibility. Finally, when does the next Wednesday midnight train depart? 6 days from now, next Wednesday. Book 3 first-class compartments. 1 for me, 1 for you, 1 for the dogs. Coordinate with the railway management regarding the Doberman's presence. And Archie? His eyes opened, hard as agate. If I'm going to endure this absurdity, we'll do it properly. I want complete information on every passenger, every staff member, and every stop along that route. I want blueprints of the train cars. I want schedules, procedures, and protocols. And I want Inspector Kramer to provide federal oversight, someone with authority aboard that train in case we need to make arrests. I'll arrange everything. Also contact Fritz. Tell him to prepare travel provisions sufficient for 2 days. If I'm leaving my kitchen, I'm bringing my food." He stood, signaling the end of discussion. "And Archie? Not a word of this to anyone outside our immediate circle. If the railway network learns we're planning to board that train, they'll either cancel the service or arrange another accident. Surprise is our only advantage." He headed for the elevator. The 5 Dobermans, who'd been watching this entire conversation with what seemed like comprehension, followed him in a solemn procession. Caesar paused at the elevator door and looked back at me with an expression I interpreted as, "This should be interesting." I sat alone in the office, contemplating what I'd just convinced Wolfe to do. In 7 years since the security upgrades, he'd left the brownstone exactly twice. Once for a doctor's appointment he couldn't avoid, once for a court appearance where his testimony was legally mandated. Both times he'd been miserable, irritable, and determined never to repeat the experience. Now I'd talked him into boarding a train where a man had recently been murdered, surrounded by suspects who might include professional assassins, to solve a case involving international espionage and government corruption. Fritz was going to kill me. At 3 p.m, Prescott and Saul arrived back at the brownstone, looking exhausted but intact. Prescott had dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept since leaving Ravenmoor. Saul, always composed, simply looked like a man who'd spent 24 hours expecting violence at any moment. "Anyone follow you?" I asked. "If they did, I didn't spot them." Saul set down his camera case. "But I guarantee they know we were at the estate. There were security cameras we didn't see until we reviewed our photographs, concealed in trees, disguised as utility equipment. We were recorded the entire time we were there. Which means they'll be cleaning out that facility right now, destroying evidence before the FBI can obtain warrants and raid it." "Probably. But we got what we needed, complete documentation of their operation. That's enough to build a case." He looked around. "Where's Wolfe?" "Upstairs with his orchids, contemplating his imminent departure from the brownstone." Prescott's eyes widened. "He's leaving," but he said. "He said he doesn't leave. I convinced him that sometimes rules need exceptions." I gestured toward the office. "He'll be down at 6 for his pre-dinner consultation. Until then, Fritz will feed you, and you can rest in the guest room. You've earned it." After they'd gone upstairs, I spent the afternoon making arrangements. The Atlantic Heritage Railway manager was surprisingly accommodating about the Dobermans. Apparently wealthy eccentrics traveling with unusual companions wasn't unprecedented on their luxury service. 3 first-class compartments were booked for Wednesday midnight under false names. Inspector Kramer agreed to coordinate with the FBI for federal oversight aboard the train, and I compiled dossiers on all current railway staff and all passengers scheduled for next Wednesday's departure. By 6 p.m, I had a comprehensive operational plan. By 7, after Wolfe had descended and reviewed every detail with his characteristic thoroughness, we had refined it into something that might actually work. "We board at 11:30, Wolfe summarized. "Under assumed identities, you as James Ballard, businessman, I as his eccentric employer, the dogs as necessary companions. We occupy 3 adjacent compartments in the first sleeping car. Inspector Kramer has arranged for an FBI agent to pose as a passenger in the second car. Backup in case we identify the killer and need arrest authority. We have 6 hours aboard the train before arrival in Ravenmoor, during which time I will interview passengers and staff, examine Halford's compartment, and reconstruct the murder." "And if someone aboard recognizes you?" Prescott asked. "Your face has been in the papers." "Which is why I'll remain in my compartment as much as possible, claiming illness or eccentricity. Archie will conduct preliminary interviews, I'll interrogate promising suspects in private, and the Dobermans will discourage unwanted visitors." He looked at her directly. "You and Saul will not be aboard. This is too dangerous for civilians who've already been exposed to these people. But I want to help. You've helped considerably. Your father's journal, your investigation of the estate, your courage in continuing despite threats, all invaluable. But now the FBI knows everything. Warrants are being issued, and your role is finished. Let professionals handle the endgame." She looked like she wanted to argue, but recognized the steel in Wolfe's voice. "What happens to the network? All those government employees who've been selling secrets? They'll be arrested, prosecuted, and imprisoned. The FBI has your photographs, which constitute complete evidence of their activities. Some will attempt to flee, most will cooperate for reduced sentences, and a few will undoubtedly have sufficient connections to escape justice entirely. But the network itself will be dismantled. Wolfe's expression was cold, and whoever killed your father and Roger Halford will face murder charges. You really think you can identify the killer aboard the train? Miss Prescott, I've solved 17 murders without leaving my office. Solving one aboard a moving train will be merely a change of venue. He smiled thinly. Though I confess I'm less confident about the experience than the outcome. Archie assures me trains are comfortable. I remain skeptical. The next 6 days passed in meticulous preparation. Wolfe insisted on treating the train journey like a military campaign. Everything planned, contingencies addressed, nothing left to chance. Fritz prepared enough food to sustain us through a siege. Sandwiches, pastries, smoked meats, cheeses, and 6 bottles of beer carefully packed in insulated containers. The Dobermans received extra training in confined space behavior, though frankly they were already better mannered than most humans. I compiled detailed dossiers on everyone who would be aboard Wednesday's midnight service. Passengers, 12 total, including us. James Ballard, me, and Augustus Brenner Wolfe, using Fritz's surname. Helen Coopersmith, age 63, widow, traveling to visit family in Maine. Dr. Raymond Talbot, physician, attending medical conference in Portland. Claudia and Gregory Winstead, married couple, anniversary trip. Patricia Langford, attorney, business travel. Michael Torres, financial consultant, heading to client meeting. Professor David Quinn, historian, research trip. Angela Ferrara, gallery owner, scouting artwork. Robert Ashworth, corporate executive, destination unknown. Railway staff. Nathan Cross, senior conductor, confirmed operative. Isabel Mendez, sleeper car attendant, confirmed operative. Leonard Huxley, train manager, confirmed operative. Thomas Brennan, assistant conductor. Maria Gonzalez, dining car supervisor. James Park, porter. 3 confirmed operatives meant at least half the staff was compromised. Worse, Cross had been conductor on the night Halford died, and Mendez had been the sleeper car attendant who'd discovered his body. If either of them had killed Halford, they'd already demonstrated their ability to operate under official scrutiny without leaving evidence. Tuesday evening, Inspector Kramer visited to finalize federal coordination. He looked at our luggage, minimal for Wolfe and me, considerable for the dog's supplies, and shook his head. You're really doing this? I half expected you'd change your mind. I don't change my mind once it's properly made up, Wolfe replied, though I reserve the right to complain throughout the experience. Is your FBI agent prepared? Agent Elizabeth Vasquez, 15 years experience, currently posing as a literary agent traveling to scout main locations for a client's novel. She'll be in compartment 12, second car. If you identify the killer and need assistance, signal her through the dining car staff. They've been briefed on emergency protocols. And the warrants for Westbrook and Rutledge? Executed this morning, both arrested without incident. Westbrook immediately requested his attorney and the British Embassy. Rutledge tried to run, which was entertaining to watch. He's not built for escape and evasion. Kramer smiled grimly. They're both being held pending arraignment. The FBI is also executing search warrants on the Ravenmoor estate tonight. Whatever was there will be evidence by morning. Good. That removes the leadership, but leaves the operational structure intact. Precisely what we want. If the railway staff believe their network is still functional, they won't alter behavior. Wolfe stood, signaling the end of business. We depart from Grand Central at midnight. I trust we won't see you again until we return with a murderer. Just don't become additional victims, Wolfe. These people have already proven they'll kill to protect their interests. After Kramer left, the brownstone settled into its final pre-journey evening. Fritz was beside himself with anxiety, fussing over Wolfe's provisions like a mother preparing a child for war. The Dobermans sensed the upcoming disruption and maintained extra vigilance, rotating through their guard positions with renewed intensity. At 10 p.m. Wolfe descended from his final session with the orchids. Theodore Horstman would be maintaining them during our absence, a responsibility he took with religious seriousness. Wolfe gave him detailed instructions about temperatures, humidity, and feeding schedules, then stood for a long moment looking at his green sanctuary. If I die aboard that train, he said quietly, Theodore will at least ensure my orchids survive me. You're not going to die aboard the train, Nevertheless, it's comforting to know one's legacy is secure. He turned from the orchids. Shall we proceed to Grand Central? I'd like to board early and establish territorial control of my compartment before other passengers complicate matters. We took 2 taxis, one for Wolfe, me and Minerva, another for Caesar, Mars, Apollo and Diana with our luggage. The drivers were remarkably professional about transporting Dobermans, though I noticed both carefully documented our route, probably worried we were fleeing a crime scene. Grand Central at 11:30 was its usual nocturnal self, half empty, echoing, filled with people who were either very late or very early for wherever they were going. The Atlantic Heritage Railway maintained a private platform for its luxury services, Track 34, accessible through a nondescript door near the Oyster Bar. We presented our tickets to an attendant who looked at the 5 Dobermans with professional neutrality, clearly accustomed to eccentric wealthy passengers. Mr. Brenner and Mr. Ballard, your compartments are prepared. The dogs are registered as service animals. Emotional support, I said smoothly. Mr. Brenner requires their presence for travel anxiety. Of course. This way, please. The platform was dimly lit, atmospheric, probably intentionally, with the train waiting like a streamlined metal serpent. 8 cars, 4 sleepers, 1 dining car, 1 lounge car, and 2 equipment/luggage cars. Our compartments were in the first sleeper, closest to the dining and lounge facilities. Each compartment was surprisingly spacious: private bathroom, fold-out bed, comfortable seating, and large windows with heavy curtains. Wolfe examined his compartment with the critical eye of someone inspecting a maximum security prison cell. Acceptable, barely. The bed looks insufficient for comfort, the chair is too narrow, and there's no room for proper book storage. But I've endured worse. He sat carefully in the chair, which protested under his weight. Archie, establish the dogs in their compartment, then survey the entire car. I want to know who's aboard, where they're located, and which staff members are on duty tonight. I settled the Dobermans next door. They took possession of their space with military efficiency, Caesar immediately positioning himself by the door, Mars taking the window post, Apollo checking the bathroom, and Diana and Minerva settling on the bed. Then I walked through the car, noting compartments and occupants. Most passengers were already aboard and settling in for the overnight journey. I spotted Helen Coopersmith, the widow, reading in her compartment. Dr. Talbot was reviewing medical journals. The Winsteads were arguing quietly about something. Patricia Langford was on her phone, conducting legal business at nearly midnight. Michael Torres was already asleep. In the corridor, Isabel Mendez was checking her passenger manifest. She was perhaps 40, efficient-looking, with the kind of professional demeanor that concealed whatever she might be thinking. She glanced up as I approached. "Mr. Ballard, is your employer settled?" "As settled as he gets. He's particular about his surroundings. Most of our guests are. Please let me know if Mr. Brenner needs anything during the journey. The dining car will serve breakfast starting at 7, but I can arrange earlier service if he prefers. I'll let him know. One question. Which compartment did Roger Halford occupy 2 weeks ago?" Her expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "I'm not sure I understand why you're asking." "Professional curiosity. Mr. Brenner is a crime novelist. He's fascinated by the case and thought experiencing the actual train might provide creative inspiration." I smiled disarmingly. He'd never forgive me if I didn't at least identify the location. She studied me for a moment, calculating. Then, compartment 7, same car, 4 doors down from yours, but it's occupied tonight by Professor Quinn, so please don't disturb him. "Wouldn't dream of it. Thank you, Miss Mendez." I returned to Wolfe and reported. He listened with eyes closed, processing the information. Compartment 7, 4 doors down, same side of the corridor as ours, convenient for observation. He opened his eyes. This Mendez woman, she discovered Halford's body. According to the police report, yes. She knocked on his door around 7 a.m. to offer breakfast service, got no response, used her master key, and found him dead in bed. Locked door from inside, locked diplomatic case missing. Yet she's a confirmed operative, receiving payments from the network, which means either she killed Halford herself or she was protecting whoever did. Wolfe's fingers drummed on the chair arm. "The timing is critical, Archie. Halford boarded in New York at midnight. The poison would have taken effect within 2 to 4 hours based on the compound used, meaning he died somewhere between 2 and 4 a.m. The train stopped in Poughkeepsie at 1:30. If someone removed the diplomatic case before Halford died, it would have been there, or they removed it afterward. At Albany, the 7 a.m. stop where the body was discovered. Possible, but riskier. By 7, rigor mortis would be establishing, the compartment would be a crime scene, and removal of evidence would be difficult without immediate discovery. He shook his head. No, the case was removed at Poughkeepsie while Halford was either dying or recently dead. Someone entered his compartment, possibly with his cooperation if he was already feeling ill, took the case, and exited at the first stop. Which means the killer had to be someone Halford knew and trusted enough to let into his locked compartment in the middle of the night. Precisely. One of the railway staff he'd worked with for years, or another passenger who was also part of the network. Wolfe looked toward the window as the train lurched gently, beginning its departure from Grand Central. And now we're aboard the same train, following the same route, with the same staff. If we can identify behavioral patterns, reconstruct the sequence, and determine who had both motive and opportunity, we'll have our killer. The train picked up speed, sliding through the underground tunnels beneath Manhattan, then emerging into the night air of the Bronx. Lights flashed past in the darkness. Wolfe gripped the arms of his chair with white knuckles. "I already regret this decision," he muttered. "We've been moving for 90 seconds. 90 seconds too many." But he released his grip and straightened. "Nevertheless, we proceed. Check on the dogs. Then begin your preliminary interviews. Focus on passengers who were also aboard the night Halford died. According to your research, 3 of them repeat this journey monthly: Patricia Langford, Michael Torres, and Robert Ashworth. The attorney, the financial consultant, and the corporate executive. You think one of them is part of the network? I think people who travel the same route repeatedly, always on Wednesday midnight service, are either creatures of habit or operatives maintaining contact with their handlers. Determine which category our fellow passengers occupy." I started with Patricia Langford, the attorney, who was still awake in her compartment reviewing documents. I knocked gently. She opened the door with the expression of someone accustomed to late-night interruptions. "Yes?" "James Ballard. I'm traveling with Augustus Brenner, the novelist. He's interested in speaking with passengers who've traveled this route before, research for his next book, which involves a train setting. Might you have a few minutes?" She considered, then nodded. 5 minutes. I have a deposition to review before morning." Her compartment was meticulously organized, files stacked by category, laptop open to legal databases, coffee cup precisely positioned. This was a woman who controlled her environment with the same precision she probably applied to courtroom arguments. "How often do you take this route, Miss Langford?" "Monthly, for the past 3 years. I have clients in Portland and prefer overnight travel. It's more efficient than flying and provides uninterrupted work time." She glanced at her watch. "Is your employer planning to interview me personally?" "Possibly. He's particular about which passengers might offer interesting perspectives." I kept my tone casual. "Were you aboard 2 weeks ago when that government courier died?" Her expression closed. "I was. Tragic situation. The FBI questioned everyone extensively. Must have been disturbing. A death aboard a train you use regularly." "It was, though I was asleep when it happened and knew nothing until we were stopped in Albany." She picked up her coffee cup, a clear dismissal signal. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." "Of course. Thank you for your time." Michael Torres, the financial consultant, was harder to interview because he was genuinely asleep. I knocked softly, waited, and eventually gave up. Some interviews would need to wait until morning. Robert Ashworth, the corporate executive, wasn't in his compartment. I checked the lounge car and found him there, drinking scotch and staring out the window at the darkness rushing past. He was mid-50s, expensively dressed, with the kind of face that suggested a lifetime of difficult decisions. "Mind if I join you?" I asked. He glanced at me, shrugged. "Free country. Free lounge car at least." I sat, ordered my own scotch from the attendant. James Ballard, traveling with my employer. Robert Ashworth. He didn't offer his hand. "You're the one with the 5 Dobermans." Word travels fast. "This is a small train, Mr. Ballard. Everyone knows everyone's business by the time we reach Poughkeepsie." He smiled without humor, especially when that business involves transporting a small army of guard dogs aboard luxury service. "What's your employer afraid of?" He's not afraid. He's eccentric. Doesn't like traveling without his companions. Must be nice, being wealthy enough to force railways to accommodate your eccentricities. Ashworth finished his scotch and signalled for another. Though I suppose we're all eccentric in our own ways. I take this same route twice monthly. Always Wednesday midnight service. Always alone. My wife thinks I'm insane, says I should fly or drive. But I like trains. They're predictable. No turbulence, no traffic. Just steady forward motion. Were you aboard when the courier died? His expression darkened. Yes. Unpleasant business. The FBI spent 3 hours questioning me like I was a suspect. I was in my compartment asleep, alone unfortunately, so no alibi, but I certainly didn't murder anyone. He looked at me directly. Why are you asking? Your employer researching murders now. He writes crime novels. Thought experiencing the actual train might be inspirational. Inspirational? Ashworth laughed bitterly. That's one word for it. Though if he wants real inspiration, he should ask the staff. They're the ones who actually work this route, who see everything that happens aboard these trains. I'm just a passenger who keeps to himself and minds his own business. I filed that away. Defensive, evasive, but not necessarily guilty. Could be innocent and simply irritated by continued attention to Halford's death. Could be guilty and deflecting suspicion. I'd need Wolfe to make the final determination. By 1 a.m., as the train slowed for the Poughkeepsie stop, I'd completed preliminary interviews with 6 passengers. Most were unremarkable: tourists, business travelers, people with legitimate reasons for overnight train service. But 3 had been aboard the night Halford died: Langford, Torres, when I finally caught him awake, and Ashworth. And all 3 had weak alibis, asleep in their compartments, alone, no witnesses. I returned to Wolfe's compartment and found him staring at the ceiling with an expression of profound resignation. How are we doing? I am contemplating the design flaws of American railways and questioning every decision that led to this moment. How is the investigation proceeding? I briefed him on the interviews. He listened without interrupting, his eyes closed again, processing. 3 repeat passengers with opportunity, all traveling alone, all without alibis. Either we're extraordinarily unlucky in our fellow travelers, or at least one of them is involved. He opened his eyes. The train is stopping. Poughkeepsie. First stop on the route. Same stop where Halford's killer likely removed the diplomatic case. Then observe carefully, Archie. Watch who exits, who boards, and who remains visible on the platform. If this network is still operational, they might repeat their pattern. Materials taken off here for local distribution. I moved to the corridor and watched through the window as the train slowed to a stop. The Poughkeepsie platform was nearly deserted at 1:15 in the morning. Just a single attendant and a taxi waiting in the darkness. 2 passengers boarded. An elderly couple headed for Maine. No one exited. But I noticed something else. Nathan Cross, the senior conductor, stepped onto the platform with a locked metal case, standard railway equipment box, nothing obviously suspicious. He walked to the edge of the platform, glanced around, and a figure emerged from the darkness. Quick exchange, case for envelope. The figure disappeared. Cross returned to the train. The entire transaction took 90 seconds. I went back to Wolfe. The conductor just passed something to someone on the platform. Locked metal case. Could have been routine maintenance equipment. Could have been classified materials. Impossible to tell from distance. Wolfe's eyes gleamed, but it establishes current operational procedure. They're still using this route for transfers, even after Halford's murder and the subsequent investigation, which means they're confident in their security, or desperate enough to continue despite risk. He leaned forward. Did you recognize the recipient? Too dark, too far. But they were expecting Cross. No hesitation, no conversation, just exchange and departure. Pre-arranged transfer point, established protocol, almost certainly how they removed Halford's diplomatic case. Wolfe was quiet for a moment. We need to search compartment 7. If Halford was killed there, traces may remain despite 2 weeks and multiple cleanings. Quinn's in there now, remember? Then we'll wait until morning when passengers are at breakfast. Meanwhile, check on the Dobermans and get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll be demanding multiple interviews, compartment inspection, and determining which of our suspects is a murderer. He glanced toward the window as the train resumed motion. I'll attempt to rest, though I anticipate failure given these circumstances. I left him contemplating his discomfort and checked on the dogs. All 5 were awake and alert, arranged in their defensive formation. Caesar looked at me as if to say, "This is acceptable, but we prefer the brownstone." I agreed completely. Morning arrived with weak sunlight filtering through the compartment window and the distant smell of coffee from the dining car. I'd slept poorly, the train's motion wasn't conducive to rest, and knowing we were surrounded by potential murderers didn't help. The Dobermans had maintained vigilant watch all night, rotating positions according to their own mysterious schedule. At 7, I found Wolfe awake and miserable in his compartment, glaring at a breakfast tray Fritz had prepared. "This coffee is cold. The sandwiches are acceptable, but cold coffee is an abomination. We're on a train, not in a restaurant. Standards differ." Standards should not differ. Coffee should be hot, beds should be comfortable, and chairs should not make ominous creaking sounds when occupied by men of substantial build. He sipped the coffee anyway, grimacing. "However, complaints are unproductive. What's our position?" "About 90 minutes from Albany. Most passengers are heading to breakfast in the dining car, which means compartment 7 will be empty soon if we want to inspect it." "Excellent. Take Caesar with you. He'll discourage interruptions. I'll remain here reviewing the dossiers and preparing interview questions. If you find anything significant in Halford's former compartment, document it photographically and report immediately." I collected Caesar from next door and waited until Professor Quinn left for breakfast. Then I used the master key I'd acquired from Mendez's utility station during my midnight corridor wandering. Caesar positioned himself as a lookout while I entered compartment 7. It looked exactly like every other first-class compartment. Clean, well-maintained, anonymous. But I'd learned from Wolfe that crime scenes always retain traces if you know where to look. I started with the bed stripped and remade multiple times since Halford's death, but mattresses retain compression patterns. I pulled up the mattress and examined the frame. Nothing unusual. The bathroom was equally unremarkable. But when I checked the ventilation grate above the sink, I found something interesting. A small piece of paper wedged into the corner, nearly invisible unless you were specifically looking for it. I extracted it carefully with tweezers from my kit. It was a fragment of a handwritten note, torn and partially burned, but with enough text visible to read. "Cannot continue this arrangement. Conscience, family needs to know. Contact FBI." Halford's handwriting, presumably. A draft of his withdrawal letter, the one that had gotten him killed. He'd tried to destroy it, but this fragment had survived, caught in the ventilation system. I photographed it from multiple angles, then checked the rest of the compartment. Under the window ledge, I found faint scratches, recent, inconsistent with normal wear. Someone had forced the window open, possibly during or after Halford's death. Caesar rumbled a warning from the corridor. I pocketed the note fragment, closed the compartment, and emerged to find Isabel Mendez approaching with a suspicious expression. "Mr. Ballard, I didn't realize you were interested in Professor Quinn's accommodations. I was looking for my employer's reading glasses. Thought I'd left them in the wrong compartment." I smiled blandly. "My mistake." Of course, she didn't believe me, but she couldn't prove anything. "Breakfast ends at 8:30. Your employer might want to visit the dining car before service concludes. He prefers private dining, travel anxiety, but thank you for the suggestion." I returned to Wolfe and showed him the photograph of the note fragment. He examined it with intense concentration, his expression hardening. "This confirms Halford's intention to withdraw from the network and contact authorities. Someone discovered his plan, either by searching his belongings or through an internal leak, and eliminated him before he could follow through." He looked up. "The window scratches you found suggest the compartment was accessed from outside after the murder. Possibly the killer left evidence inside and returned to retrieve it after the body was discovered. Or they threw evidence out the window while the train was moving. Poison container, gloves, whatever they used to administer the compound." I sat down. "The question remains, who killed him? We have 3 passengers with opportunity, all aboard that night. We have 3 railway staff who are confirmed operatives. Any of them could have done it." "Not any of them. Only someone Halford would have admitted to his locked compartment in the middle of the night. He was frightened, writing withdrawal letters, planning to contact the FBI. He wouldn't have opened his door to a stranger or someone he distrusted." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Which means the killer was someone he knew well, someone he still considered an ally despite his decision to withdraw. Another operative, perhaps, claiming concern for his safety or offering to help facilitate his exit from the network. Cross, Mendez, or Huxley, I said. Railway staff he'd worked with for 7 years. They'd have master keys, access to his schedule, knowledge of his routines, and if one of them came to his door at 2 a.m., claiming there was a problem with his travel arrangements or his diplomatic materials, he'd have let them in. Precisely. And once inside, they'd have offered him poisoned coffee or medication for his travel anxiety, waited for the compound to take effect, opened his diplomatic case using the combination he'd already given them for network transfers, removed the classified materials, and exited the compartment before he died. Wolfe leaned back. Then they offloaded the materials at Poughkeepsie, returned to their duties, and maintained perfect composure when the body was discovered hours later. So we need to determine which of the 3 staff members has the specific skills to execute that plan. Cross is the senior conductor authority, access, trust. Mendez discovered the body, suspicious timing, perfect opportunity to establish false narrative. Huxley is train manager, oversight of everything, ultimate control. All 3 equally capable, equally suspicious. Wolfe drummed his fingers. We need something more definitive. Motive beyond general network loyalty, evidence of specific planning, or a behavioral detail that reveals guilt. He looked toward the corridor. Interview them, Archie, all 3 separately, this morning before we reach Albany. Use the pretext of your employer's crime novel. Ask about railway procedures, security protocols, locked compartments. Observe their reactions, note inconsistencies, and report back. Meanwhile, I'll interview the 3 passengers who had opportunity, Langford, Torres, and Ashworth. If any of them were involved, I'll extract a confession through proper interrogation. I found Nathan Cross in the equipment car, reviewing some paperwork with professional intensity. He was mid-50s, solidly built, with the kind of weathered face that suggested a lifetime of railway work. When I approached, he looked up with polite but distant courtesy. Mr. Ballard, something I can help you with? My employer has questions about train security procedures, research for his novel, specifically about locked compartments and master key protocols. Mind if I ask a few questions? He studied me for a moment, then shrugged. I suppose. What do you want to know? The compartment doors lock from inside. Who has keys that can override that lock? 3 people. Me, the sleeper car attendant, and the train manager. Standard safety protocol in case of emergencies, fire, medical crisis, that sort of thing. Could a passenger lock their door in a way that prevents even master key access? Not easily. They could barricade it physically, but the locks themselves can always be opened from outside with proper keys. He set down his paperwork. Why this interest in locked compartments? This about the Halford situation. Should it be? You're not the first person to ask these questions. The FBI spent hours interrogating me about that night, who had access, how someone could have entered a locked compartment, why the diplomatic case was missing. I told them then what I'm telling you now. I was performing my standard conductor duties. I never entered Halford's compartment until after the body was discovered, and I don't know what happened to his materials. But you worked with Halford before. He traveled this route multiple times over several years. Cross's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. He was a regular passenger. I knew him professionally, that's all. Did you know he was planning to contact the FBI? That he wanted to withdraw from whatever arrangement he had with your network? Now the mask cracked. Cross went very still, his hands tightening on the paperwork. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. I think Halford told someone in the network that he was done, that his conscience wouldn't let him continue, and I think that someone killed him before he could expose the operation. I kept my voice level, conversational. The question is whether you were the one who did it, or whether you just facilitated it. For 5 seconds, Cross didn't move. Then he stood abruptly. I have duties to attend to, Mr. Ballard. This conversation is over, and if you continue making unfounded accusations, I'll have you removed from this train at the next stop. He walked past me with rigid posture, disappearing toward the forward cars. Caesar, who'd been watching from a discreet distance, moved to my side. That went well, I muttered. 1 down, 2 to go. Isabel Mendez was in the sleeper car, organizing linens with mechanical efficiency. When I approached with my questions about security procedures, she answered smoothly and professionally. but her eyes were calculating, measuring how much I knew and how dangerous I might be. The master keys are controlled carefully, she explained. We maintain logs of every time they're used, which compartments are accessed, and for what purpose. After the Halford situation, the FBI reviewed all our logs thoroughly. Nothing suspicious was found. Because the logs were accurate, or because they'd been altered. She smiled thinly. I wouldn't know how to alter official railway logs, Mr. Ballard. I'm a sleeper car attendant, not a forger. But you discovered Halford's body. You had the first access to the crime scene, the first opportunity to observe what was there and what was missing. If evidence needed to be removed or repositioned, you had perfect cover. I found a dead man in a locked compartment and immediately reported it to Cross and Huxley, who contacted authorities. That's what happened, and that's what I told the FBI. Her voice hardened. Now, unless you have actual business with me, Mr. Ballard, I have work to do. She turned away, ending the interview as definitively as Cross had. But I'd seen something in her expression when I mentioned evidence removal. A flicker of recognition, quickly suppressed. She knew more than she was saying, and she was frightened someone would discover it. Leonard Huxley, the train manager, was the most composed of the three. I found him in his office, a small compartment near the dining car, reviewing schedules and maintenance reports. He listened to my questions with patient attention, answered with perfect professional courtesy, and gave absolutely nothing away. Security is paramount on our trains, he said. We maintain the highest standards precisely to avoid incidents like the Halford tragedy. Unfortunately, no system is perfect, and determined individuals can sometimes circumvent protocols. Do you think someone aboard this train circumvented your protocols to murder Halford? I think someone poisoned a federal courier and stole classified materials. Yes. Whether that person was a passenger, staff member, or outside agent who accessed the train at a stop, I couldn't say. He smiled politely, though I'm certain the FBI will eventually determine the truth. You weren't concerned that this incident might damage the railway's reputation, affect your business operations. Of course I was concerned. Murder aboard a luxury train is terrible publicity. But we cooperated fully with authorities, implemented additional security measures, and continued operations. What else could we do? You could tell the truth about the intelligence network you've been facilitating for 20 years. His smile didn't waver, but his eyes went cold. I think you should return to your compartment, Mr. Ballard. Your employer's creative imagination seems to have infected your sense of reality. We're a legitimate railway service, nothing more, and unfounded accusations could result in legal consequences. 3 interviews, 3 defensive responses, and 0 concrete evidence. I returned to Wolfe feeling like I'd made progress but couldn't prove it. He listened to my reports, then nodded slowly. All 3 guilty of network involvement, but we still lack direct evidence of which one killed Halford. However, their reactions confirm they're frightened, which means they know we're dangerous to them. He glanced at his watch. We're approaching Albany, where the body was discovered. I want to be visible on the platform during our stop. Observe who exits, who boards, and whether anyone repeats the Poughkeepsie transfer pattern. You're actually going to leave your compartment. Briefly and under protest. But yes, sometimes direct observation provides insights that second-hand reports cannot. The train slowed for Albany at 9:40, and Wolfe emerged from his compartment looking like a man facing execution. He moved to the exit door with Caesar and Mars flanking him, and when the train stopped, he actually stepped onto the platform. The Albany station was busier than Poughkeepsie, several dozen people waiting for various trains, vendors selling coffee and newspapers, a general atmosphere of normal transit activity. Wolfe stood near our car's exit, observing with his particular intensity that missed nothing. I noticed it first, Leonard Huxley exiting the train with another locked metal case, identical to the one Cross had carried at Poughkeepsie. He walked to the far end of the platform, stopped at a luggage cart, and set the case down. Moments later, a porter, not part of our train's crew, collected the case and wheeled it away. "Transfer complete," I said quietly. "They're continuing operations despite everything." Confirming their desperation, Wolfe replied, "They've lost their leadership. Their operational headquarters has been raided, and they're under federal investigation. Yet they persist in making transfers, which suggests..." He stopped, eyes widening slightly. which suggests the materials they're transporting now are time-sensitive and critically valuable. Possibly more classified documents they've already stolen and must deliver before authorities intercept them. So we're not just solving Halford's murder, we're preventing additional espionage. Precisely, which means we must identify the killer and shut down this network before we reach Ravenmoor. He turned back toward the train. I've seen enough. Let's return to our investigation. But as we turned, I saw something that made my blood cold. Robert Ashworth, the corporate executive, standing at the opposite end of the platform, watching Huxley's transfer with intense attention. And when the porter wheeled the case away, Ashworth pulled out his phone and made a call. Coordination, observation, confirmation that the transfer had occurred. Ashworth wasn't just a passenger. He was part of the network. I pulled Wolfe back aboard and explained what I'd seen. His expression went grim. "Then we have our murderer," he said quietly. Ashworth was aboard the night Halford died. He travels this route regularly, and he's actively monitoring the network's current operations, which means he's trusted and involved at a high level. He looked at me directly. "We need to confront him before we reach Burlington, the next stop where he might exit and disappear. Gather the evidence we've collected, coordinate with Agent Vasquez, and prepare for interrogation. This ends within the hour." I spent the next 30 minutes coordinating with FBI Agent Vasquez through the dining car staff, briefing her on what we'd discovered and requesting her presence for the confrontation. She arrived at our compartment looking exactly like what she was, a federal agent dressed as a civilian, with competence radiating from every gesture. "You're certain Ashworth is the killer?" she asked Wolfe. "Certain of his network involvement, highly confident of his culpability in Halford's murder, but I require definitive proof, which can only be obtained through proper interrogation." Wolfe laced his fingers over his stomach. "Here's what we know. Halford decided to withdraw from the intelligence network and contact authorities. Someone discovered his intention and eliminated him aboard this train. The killer had to be someone Halford knew and trusted enough to admit to his locked compartment at 2 a.m. We have 3 railway staff who are confirmed operatives, but they're too obvious. Killing a passenger aboard their own train would draw exactly the kind of attention that has now materialized." "So the killer was another passenger," Vasquez said. "Someone who could claim innocent traveler status while actually serving as network security." "Precisely. Robert Ashworth travels this route twice monthly, always on Wednesday midnight service. He was aboard the night Halford died. He has no legitimate alibi, and this morning he observed and confirmed a classified materials transfer at the Albany platform, behavior inconsistent with innocent business traveler." Wolfe's eyes hardened. "He's an enforcer, Miss Vasquez, the network's internal security, tasked with eliminating threats like Halford, who might expose the operation. Then we arrest him now and interrogate him in federal custody."
"We could, but that alerts the railway staff that we've identified their network structure, and they'll destroy evidence before you can secure it. Better to confront Ashworth in controlled circumstances, extract a confession that implicates the entire organization, and then execute coordinated arrests." He looked at me. "Archie, invite Mr. Ashworth to my compartment for an interview. Tell him my employer wants to discuss his business travel patterns for the novel. Agent Vasquez, position yourself in the adjacent compartment with recording equipment and bring Caesar and Mars. Their presence will discourage violence."
I found Ashworth in the lounge car, drinking coffee and watching the landscape rush past. When I explained that Mr. Brenner wanted to interview him, he shrugged with apparent indifference. "Sure, not like I have anywhere else to be." I led him to Wolfe's compartment, Caesar and Mars flanking the corridor like sentries. Ashworth noticed them, but didn't comment. When he entered, Wolfe was seated in his inadequate chair, looking like an emperor, receiving a potentially hostile ambassador. "Mr. Ashworth, thank you for indulging my curiosity. Please sit." Ashworth took the only other chair, settling in with casual confidence. "Your assistant said you're writing a crime novel set on a train. Seems like you're taking research seriously, even bringing guard dogs aboard. The Dobermans are companions, not research subjects, though they do serve certain practical purposes." Wolfe studied him with unsettling intensity. "You travel this route regularly, I understand. Twice monthly for several years. That's considerable commitment to overnight rail service." "I like trains. Already told your assistant that." "Yes, but you didn't explain why you take this specific route at this specific time." Always Wednesday midnight service, always alone, always maintaining the same behavioral pattern. Most business travelers vary their schedules. You don't. Why? Habit. Predictability. What's your point? My point, Wolfe said quietly, is that you're not a business traveler at all. You're an intelligence operative working for a criminal network that's been trafficking classified materials through this railway for 20 years. And 3 weeks ago, you murdered Roger Halford in compartment 7 because he decided to expose that network. The casual confidence drained from Ashworth's face, replaced by something much colder. That's an interesting accusation. You have proof. Considerable proof. Documentary evidence from the network's operational headquarters in Ravenmoor, showing your involvement in dozens of materials transfers. Testimony from railway staff currently in FBI custody, confirming your role as network security, and physical evidence from Hatton's compartment indicating the murder weapon was administered by someone he knew and admitted willingly at 2 in the morning. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. You were that person, Mr. Ashworth. You entered his compartment under pretext of concern for his safety, offered him poisoned coffee or medication, waited for the compound to take effect, opened his diplomatic case using the combination the network had already obtained, and offloaded the materials at Poughkeepsie. Then you returned to your compartment and maintained the fiction of an innocent passenger while Hatton died alone. Ashworth's expression didn't change, but his hands tightened on the chair arms. You can't prove any of that. Actually, I can. Miss Vasquez? The FBI agent emerged from the adjacent compartment, badge displayed. Robert Ashworth, you're under arrest for the murder of Roger Halford and conspiracy to commit espionage against the United States. You have the right to remain silent. Ashworth moved faster than I expected, lunging from his chair toward the compartment door. But Caesar was faster, positioning himself in the doorway with a growl that promised serious consequences. Mars moved to block the window. Ashworth froze, trapped between Dobermans and federal authority. Don't, Vasquez said quietly, hand on her weapon. It's over, Mr. Ashworth. The network is finished. Westbrook and Rutledge are in custody. The Ravenmoor estate has been raided. Every operative we've identified is being arrested simultaneously across 4 states. You're the last piece of the puzzle. Ashworth looked at Wolfe with something like grudging respect. You figured it out fast. How? Logic and observation. Halford's death wasn't random tragedy. It was targeted elimination with specific motive. Once I understood the network structure, identifying its enforcer was simply a matter of determining who had both capability and pattern consistent with internal security. Wolfe's tone was matter-of-fact. You killed him because he was going to expose everything, but in doing so, you guaranteed exactly the outcome you were trying to prevent. His death drew attention, triggered investigation, and ultimately dismantled the entire organization. He was weak, Ashworth said bitterly. 7 years of profitable work, and suddenly he develops a conscience? He would have destroyed everything we'd built. What you'd built was treasonous and deserved destruction. Wolfe's voice hardened. You sold American secrets for profit, corrupted government employees, and murdered a man who'd realized the enormity of his mistakes and tried to make amends. Your network facilitated espionage that may have cost lives and certainly damaged national security. And you did it all for money. Not just money. Principle. The government classifies everything, restricts information that should be public, maintains secrecy for no legitimate reason. We were correcting that imbalance. By selling naval specifications to foreign intelligence services, I interjected. That's quite the principled correction. Ashworth didn't respond. Vasquez moved forward with handcuffs, and Caesar and Mars maintained their positions until she'd secured him. Only then did they step aside, allowing her to lead him toward the exit. Train will stop in Burlington in 20 minutes, she said. I'll transfer him to FBI custody there. We'll need your testimony for prosecution, Mr. Wolfe. You'll have it, along with all documented evidence we've collected. Wolfe looked exhausted, understandable given the circumstances. Miss Vasquez, what about the railway staff? Cross, Mendez and Huxley. Already being arrested. We coordinated simultaneous takedowns once you identified Ashworth as the primary target. They'll be charged as accessories to murder and conspiracy to commit espionage. She paused at the door. Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Wolfe. The FBI doesn't often work with private detectives, but in this case, your involvement was invaluable. I did it for Miss Prescott and her father, not for federal gratitude. but you're welcome nonetheless. After they'd gone, I sat down heavily in the chair Ashworth had vacated. So it's over. Network dismantled, killer arrested, justice achieved, and we did it all while trapped on a moving train with questionable coffee and uncomfortable beds. Never again, Wolfe muttered. When we reach Ravenmoor, we're immediately boarding the next train back to New York, and I'm not leaving my brownstone again until civilization develops teleportation technology. What about examining the estate, confirming the evidence matches Prescott's photographs? Agent Vasquez and the FBI can handle that. We've solved the murder. The rest is bureaucratic cleanup. He looked toward the window as the train began slowing for Burlington. I want to go home, Archie. I want my orchids, my chair, my office, Fritz's cooking, and the complete absence of motion. This investigation is concluded. The train stopped in Burlington at 11:15. We watched through the window as Vasquez transferred Ashworth to waiting FBI agents. Then Nathan Cross, Isabel Mendez, and Leonard Huxley were also removed in handcuffs, looking considerably less composed than they had hours earlier. The remaining passengers, innocent travelers who'd witnessed none of this drama, continued their journeys to Maine, probably never realizing they'd been aboard a train that had just dismantled an international intelligence network. By noon, we were back in motion, heading for Ravenmoor with Wolfe, me, 5 Dobermans, and a collection of legitimate tourists who kept asking why there were federal agents at the Burlington station. I gave them the short version. Some people were arrested for railway crimes, nothing to worry about. Close enough to the truth. The train arrived in Ravenmoor at 2 p.m., under appropriately atmospheric conditions, fog rolling in from the ocean, grey skies, and a persistent drizzle that made everything look like it had been painted in watercolors, left out in the rain. The station was small, a single platform, a waiting room that doubled as a telegraph office, and a parking area where 3 cars were waiting for passengers who actually had destinations in this town. We were not among them. Wolfe wanted to return to New York immediately, but the next southbound train didn't depart until 6 p.m. 4 hours of enforced residence in a town neither of us had any desire to explore. Unacceptable, Wolfe declared, standing on the platform with rain starting to soak his coat, and the Dobermans arranged around him like a protective detail. There must be alternative transportation. There's a bus that runs to Portland, the station master offered helpfully. Leaves in 20 minutes. How long is the bus journey? 3 hours, plus a 40-minute layover before you can catch a train to New York. Wolfe calculated in silence, then sighed with profound resignation. We'll wait for the 6 o'clock train. Find us suitable accommodations where we can remain dry and feed the dogs. The only establishment open on a Thursday afternoon in October was a diner called The Anchor, which claimed to serve Ravenmoor's finest seafood since 1947. Given that the competition appeared to be exactly 0 other restaurants, this was technically accurate. We settled into a corner booth, Wolfe, me, and 5 wet Dobermans who drew stares from the 3 other customers and 1 extremely nervous waitress. Fritz's provisions were long exhausted, and even Wolfe was hungry enough to consider local cuisine. You serve anything besides seafood? I asked the waitress. Clam chowder, fish and chips, lobster roll, and fried scallops, also coffee and pie. She eyed the Dobermans warily. Are those safe? Perfectly safe unless you threaten us, in which case they become extremely unsafe. I'd recommend treating them as honored guests. I ordered clam chowder for both of us with extra bread, and water bowls for the dogs, please. They've had a long journey. While we waited for food, I called Prescott at the brownstone to update her on the case resolution. She answered on the second ring, sounding both relieved and emotional. You caught him. You caught the person who killed my father. We caught the person who killed Halford, and the FBI arrested the railway staff who were involved in the network. Your father's death is still officially natural causes, but given what we know about their methods, poison that mimics cardiac arrest, there's strong circumstantial evidence. His murder was ordered by the same people. The FBI is reviewing his case for potential exhumation and proper investigation. Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. Thank you both. I never thought, her voice caught, I never thought anyone would actually care enough to investigate properly. Nero Wolfe doesn't abandon clients, Miss Prescott, and he particularly doesn't abandon clients whose fathers were murdered for doing the right thing. I glanced at Wolfe, who was staring at his clam chowder with an expression that suggested it had personally offended him. We're in Ravenmoor now, waiting for the return train. 4 hours until departure, then overnight back to New York. We should be at the brownstone by morning. I'll make sure Fritz has breakfast ready. And Mr. Goodwin, tell Mr. Wolfe I'll have his full payment delivered tomorrow. He earned every dollar. After I'd disconnected, Wolfe finally tasted his chowder, made a face, and pushed it aside. This is an insult to chowder. Fritz would weep if he saw this. Fritz isn't here. Eat it anyway. You need food, and there's literally nowhere else to go in this town. He ate 3 spoonfuls under protest, then stopped. I've fulfilled my obligation, Archie. I've solved the murder, identified the network, facilitated arrests, and endured travel to a destination I never wanted to visit. My capacity for tolerance is now completely exhausted. If that train is delayed even 1 minute, I'm chartering a private vehicle to drive us back to Manhattan regardless of cost. Noted. In the meantime, we could walk to the estate, see what the FBI found during their raid. Absolutely not. I'm not walking through mud and rain to examine a crime scene that's already been thoroughly processed by federal agents. We'll wait here, I'll suffer through this alleged food, and we'll board that train the moment it arrives. The waitress returned with more coffee and cautious interest. You folks hear about all the federal agents at the old Blackwell place. Quite the excitement yesterday. Agents everywhere, vans taking stuff away, helicopters landing in the field. First interesting thing to happen in Ravenmoor since forever. We're just passing through, I said, though we'd heard about the estate. What do locals think about it? She shrugged. Most people didn't know anything was going on there. Place has been empty for decades, or so we thought. Turns out someone was using it for, what did they say on the news? Intelligence operations? Crazy. Just crazy. My grandmother always said that estate was bad luck. Blackwell himself vanished. Several caretakers died mysteriously over the years. Strange cars coming and going at night. Guess she was right. After she left, Wolfe looked at me. Strange cars at night, caretakers dying mysteriously, and a vanished industrialist. If we'd known Ravenmoor's local history before accepting this case, I might have reconsidered. No, you wouldn't. You were hooked the moment you read that telegram. I drank my coffee, which was actually decent. Besides, we did good work. A murderer arrested, a network dismantled, justice for Prescott and her father. That's worth one miserable train journey. Is it? My orchids have been without my supervision for 48 hours. Fritz is undoubtedly anxious. The brownstone security system hasn't had proper oversight, and I've eaten 4 meals that ranged from mediocre to actively offensive. He glared at nothing in particular. When we return, I'm not leaving my home for any reason short of federal subpoena or natural disaster. Until the next client shows up with an interesting case. I'll have you refuse them at the door. You say that every time. Then you get intrigued and agree to investigate. This time will be different. It wouldn't be, of course, but I didn't argue the point. Wolfe needed his complaints. They were how he processed discomfort and maintained his sense of identity in circumstances beyond his control. We spent the next 3 hours in that diner, drinking mediocre coffee, watching rain fall on a nearly deserted fishing town, and waiting for 6 o'clock with the patience of prisoners counting down to release. The Dobermans napped under the table in a companionable pile. Other customers came and went, most giving us wide berth because of the dogs, some asking if we were FBI agents. I said no, and one drunk old fisherman insisting he'd seen strange lights near the Blackwell estate for years, and nobody had believed him until now. Vindication is sweet, he told us, breath reeking of whiskey. I told him something weird was happening out there, told him for 20 years. Now look, spies, right here in Ravenmoor. Wolfe endured this monologue with visible pain, then paid our bill and led our entire party back to the train station. We arrived at 5:40 to find the southbound train already waiting, early miraculously, and I've never seen Wolfe move faster toward any destination in his life. We boarded, claimed our compartments, settled the Dobermans, and Wolfe collapsed into his chair with the expression of a man who'd survived warfare. Never again, he repeated, this time with complete certainty. I don't care what client arrives with what fascinating mystery. I'm staying in my brownstone until death claims me. And even then, I'll try to arrange things so my funeral is conducted in my office, rather than requiring transport to a cemetery. The train departed at precisely 6 o'clock. As Ravenmoor disappeared into fog and rain behind us, Wolfe closed his eyes and appeared to achieve something approaching peace, The return journey was considerably more relaxed than the outbound trip. No murderers to identify, no network to dismantle, no pressure beyond simply enduring the trip until we reached Grand Central. Wolfe spent most of the time in his compartment with Minerva, reading a book he'd brought from the brownstone and occasionally emerging to complain about various discomforts. I spent the evening in the lounge car, mostly because I wanted to see the conclusion play out in real time. Agent Vasquez had remained in federal custody with Ashworth and the railway staff, but she'd arranged for another FBI agent, a man named Carson, to brief us on the investigation's progress. Complete success, Carson reported, settling across from me with coffee. We arrested 47 network operatives across 6 states based on the documentation from Ravenmoor. Most are cooperating in exchange for reduced sentences. Westbrook and Rutledge are trying to leverage diplomatic immunity and corporate legal protections, but they'll fail. The evidence is overwhelming. What about the classified materials that were being transferred? Did you recover them? Some. The diplomatic case from Halford's murder was located in a storage facility outside Boston. Naval specifications intact but compromised. We're assessing what damage might have been done if copies were already sold to foreign interests. Other materials are still being tracked down, but we've shut down the distribution network so future transfers are impossible. And the railway itself? Atlantic Heritage is bankrupt and shutting down operations. Federal seizure of assets, criminal liability, complete collapse. The Wednesday midnight service ran its last trip, the one you were aboard. They'll sell the train cars for scrap. He smiled grimly. Poetic justice, really. They used that railway to commit crimes for 20 years. Now it's being dismantled as part of their punishment. I relayed this information to Wolfe, who received it with satisfaction. Good. A proper outcome. Network destroyed, justice achieved, and railway eliminated, so no one can replicate their methods. Miss Prescott will be pleased. She'll be more pleased when the FBI officially investigates her father's death. Carson said they're opening a federal homicide inquiry based on the pattern of poisonings and the operational methods documented at Ravenmoor. As they should. Harold Prescott died for trying to expose criminals. He deserves official recognition of that sacrifice. Wolfe was quiet for a moment. When we return to the brownstone, send flowers to his grave with a card that reads, "Your courage was not forgotten. Sign it from our office." "Will do." The train continued through the darkness, stopping occasionally at small stations where a few passengers departed and no one boarded. By midnight, we were alone in our car, just us and the Dobermans, heading back to civilization. At 2 a.m., I woke to Caesar's warning growl from the adjacent compartment. I was up instantly, pistol drawn, moving to the corridor where Caesar and Mars had positioned themselves defensively. But there was no threat, just a porter passing through on routine patrol, startled to find himself facing 2 Dobermans and an armed detective. "Jesus!" He backed up, hands raised. "I was just checking on passengers. At 2 in the morning? Standard protocol. We make rounds every 3 hours to ensure everyone's comfortable and safe." I lowered the pistol. "We're fine. Extremely fine. As you can see, we have our own security." He nodded rapidly and retreated. Caesar watched him go with an expression that suggested he'd been hoping for more excitement. "Stand down," I told him. "We're almost home. Don't ruin it by eating innocent railway employees." By dawn, we were approaching New York, the landscape shifting from rural darkness to suburban sprawl to urban density. Wolfe emerged from his compartment looking rumpled but functional, ready to reclaim his normal existence. "Almost there," I said. "Another hour, and you'll be back in your chair with Fritz's breakfast and your orchids awaiting inspection." "It cannot come soon enough. I've had sufficient adventure for several lifetimes, Archie. From now on, adventure comes to me. I don't pursue it aboard uncomfortable trains through questionable geography." The train pulled into Grand Central at 7:30 Friday morning. We disembarked with our luggage and 5 energetic Dobermans, who seemed genuinely happy to be back in New York. Took 2 taxis again, same drill as before, and by 8:15 we were back at the brownstone. Fritz met us at the door, looking both relieved and emotional. "Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Goodwin, you're back safely. I was so worried. Trains are dangerous, and you were investigating murderers, and anything could have happened." "Nothing happened, Fritz, except prolonged discomfort and regrettable meals." Wolfe moved past him toward the office. "Is everything well here? Security system functional? Orchids healthy?" Everything's perfect. Theodore reported all orchids are thriving. No security incidents. Miss Prescott called yesterday to confirm payment would be delivered today. He followed Wolfe anxiously. I have breakfast ready, shirred eggs with bacon, fresh bread, and proper coffee. Would you like to eat immediately? Immediately, and without interruption. And Fritz? After breakfast, no visitors, no phone calls, and no cases for at least 1 week. I require recovery time. Of course, Mr. Wolfe. Whatever you need. We settled into the office like returning explorers who'd survived an expedition to dangerous territories. The red leather chair accepted Wolfe's weight with its familiar creak. The Dobermans distributed themselves to their regular positions, Caesar at the front door, Mars at the rear, Apollo on the second-floor landing, Diana patrolling the basement, and Minerva beneath Wolfe's desk where she could maintain close supervision. Everything was exactly as it should be. Fritz served breakfast with the care of a man who'd feared he might never have the opportunity again. The eggs were perfect, the bacon crisp, the coffee hot and strong. Wolfe ate in complete silence, reconstructing his equilibrium through proper food and familiar surroundings. At 9, Lucinda Prescott arrived with the final payment and gratitude that was almost painful to witness. She'd been crying, relief, grief for her father, satisfaction that justice had been achieved. Wolfe accepted her thanks with his usual gruff efficiency, then said something that surprised even me. Your father was a brave man, Miss Prescott. He recognized evil, documented it systematically despite personal risk, and tried to expose it even when authorities failed to listen. That kind of courage is rare. His journal was instrumental in dismantling the network, and his sacrifice will be remembered by everyone it helped bring to justice. She left the brownstone looking somehow lighter, as if a burden she'd carried for months had finally been lifted. After she'd gone, Wolfe leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. Satisfactory conclusion. Client paid. Case solved. Justice achieved. And now, Archie, I require orchid time. Don't disturb me unless the brownstone is actively burning down. He headed for the elevator. The Dobermans, sensing his return to normal routine, relaxed from high alert to standard vigilance. And I sat at my desk, writing up the complete case file while details were fresh. The night train to Ravenmoor had run its final journey. The network that had operated for 20 years was dismantled. A murderer faced federal prosecution, and Nero Wolfe had left his brownstone, solved a locked-room murder aboard a moving train, and returned safely to his comfortable fortress. All things considered, it had been a successful case. Though I'd never tell Wolfe, part of me had enjoyed the adventure. A week passed in blessed routine. Wolfe maintained his schedule with religious devotion, orchids from 9 to 11 and 4 to 6, meals at precise times, beer at designated intervals, and absolutely no discussion of travel or cases involving transportation. Inspector Kramer visited twice for updates on the federal prosecution, bringing news that Ashworth was cooperating fully in exchange for life imprisonment instead of death penalty, a pragmatic choice that ensured maximum information about the network's international connections. They're finding operatives in 7 countries, Kramer reported, sitting in the red leather chair with an unlit cigar. Ashworth ran security for the entire organization. He's naming names, providing evidence, helping the FBI unravel 20 years of intelligence trafficking. You did good work, Wolfe. I did adequate work under adverse circumstances. The credit belongs primarily to Miss Prescott, whose father's documentation made everything possible. Wolfe sipped his beer. What about Harold Prescott's death? Will the FBI investigate properly? Already happening. They're exhuming the body for toxicology analysis, interviewing witnesses, reviewing medical records. If the poison compound matches what was used on Halford and preliminary analysis suggests it will, they'll charge the network leadership with his murder as well. Westbrook and Rutledge are looking at death penalty counts, even without Ashworth's cooperation. Good. Justice delayed but not denied. Wolfe set down his beer. And the classified materials that were sold through the network. What damage assessment? Ongoing. NSA and Defense Intelligence are tracking what was compromised and where it ended up. Some materials were sold to foreign governments, some to private contractors, some just disappeared into black market channels. They're implementing new security protocols to prevent similar breaches. Kramer shook his head. Biggest intelligence compromise since Aldrich Ames, and it was happening right under everyone's noses for 2 decades. Because they were clever enough to hide criminal enterprise within legitimate luxury service. The railway provided perfect cover, exclusive, expensive, minimal oversight, and by recruiting government employees with financial vulnerabilities, they ensured steady supply of classified materials. Wolfe's eyes were half closed. Simple, effective, and profitable until someone's conscience interfered. Halford's conscience saved potentially hundreds of additional compromises. If he hadn't tried to withdraw, if you hadn't investigated his murder, this network could have continued indefinitely. Kramer stood to leave. So again, good work, even if you complained the entire time about train travel and uncomfortable beds. After he'd gone, I looked at Wolfe. You going to admit you're glad you took the case? I'm glad the case is concluded. The client is satisfied, and I'm back in my brownstone. Whether those outcomes justified the journey remains philosophically debatable, but he smiled slightly. Though I confess there was certain satisfaction in solving a locked-room murder aboard a moving train with 5 Dobermans as witnesses. Not many detectives can claim that achievement. Not many detectives would attempt it. Which demonstrates either my unique courage or my unique foolishness. Possibly both. He picked up a book, a thriller about international espionage that had arrived in the morning mail, and settled in for reading. Now leave me alone, Archie. I've had sufficient conversation for one day. 3 months later, on a cold January evening, we received a letter from Lucinda Prescott. She'd returned to Ravenmoor after her father's funeral, which had been attended by FBI officials who publicly acknowledged his contribution to national security and had been elected to the town council. She was working on converting the Blackwell estate into a museum, documenting the intelligence network, so future generations remember that vigilance is necessary and ordinary citizens can make a difference. She included a photograph, the Ravenmoor train station, now abandoned, with a historical marker that read, "From this station, Harold Prescott observed and documented criminal intelligence trafficking for 5 years. His courage helped dismantle a network that threatened national security. Never forget that individual bravery matters." Wolfe read the letter, studied the photograph, and set both carefully aside. She's built something meaningful from tragedy. That's commendable. Think you'll ever go back to see the museum? Absolutely not. I've seen enough of Ravenmoor to last multiple lifetimes. If she wants to send photographs, I'll examine them from the comfort of my office. But I won't return in person. What if another case requires train travel? Then I'll refuse the case, regardless of how interesting it might be. He looked at me with complete certainty. I've proven I can leave this brownstone when necessary, Archie. That's sufficient. From now on, necessity will need to be considerably more compelling before I repeat that particular experience. That evening, as Fritz served roasted pheasant with cherry sauce and the Dobermans lounged content in their various positions, the brownstone felt exactly as it should, secure, comfortable, and isolated from the chaos of a world that occasionally required investigation, but never required physical presence. Nero Wolfe had left his fortress, solved a murder aboard a moving train, dismantled an international intelligence network, and returned home safely. The adventure had been successful, justice had been served, and order had been restored. And if another telegram arrived at midnight with cryptic warnings and mysterious destinations, well, that was a problem for future Wolfe to consider. For now, there was pheasant, beer, orchids waiting upstairs, and the complete absence of motion. Exactly as it should be.